Siberia stretches across the earth like a frozen expanse of shadows and silence, a land where forests whisper secrets and rivers hide truths beneath icy surfaces. Among its endless taiga and jagged mountains, events have occurred that defy explanation. Disappearances, unexplained phenomena, and encounters that leave no evidence but a lingering sense of unease. Each case carries a weight that history cannot fully account for, yet they remain etched into the memory of the land, haunting the minds of those who dare to traverse its remote reaches. Through snow-laden forests, across desolate lakes, and into the heart of Siberia's hidden valleys, you will trace the footsteps of the unknown. From eerie lights beneath Lake Baikal to unexplained disasters in frozen mountains, each expedition uncovers fragments of truth, strange artifacts and whispered warnings, inviting you to confront mysteries that resist resolution and linger long after you leave the wilderness behind. The Dyatlov Pass tragedy. Winter closes early over the northern Ural Mountains, where endless forests rise toward barren ridges that cut through the sky like frozen waves. In February 1959, one isolated slope in this wilderness became the centre of a mystery that investigators and historians still debate decades later. The event is now known as the Dyatlov Pass tragedy, named after the young engineering student who led the expedition into those remote mountains. What began as an ambitious winter trek soon turned into one of Siberia's most disturbing unsolved cases, leaving behind a scattering of clues that seem to contradict both nature and human logic. Igor Dyatlov was 23 years old and studying radio engineering at the Ural Polytechnic Institute in Sverdlovsk, a city now known as Yekaterinburg. Like many students in the institute's sports tourism club, he was experienced in demanding expeditions across the Soviet wilderness. In late January 1959, he organised a winter journey through the northern Urals, aiming to reach Mount Otorten, a remote peak whose name in the Mansi language roughly translates to "don't go there." 9 members ultimately joined the trek after one participant, Yuri Yudin, turned back due to illness before the group entered the harshest terrain. The expedition members were young but far from reckless. Most were skilled hikers certified in demanding categories of Soviet trekking, accustomed to long distances and severe winter conditions. Their equipment reflected careful preparation: heavy wool clothing, skis, axes, notebooks, cameras, and provisions for weeks in the wilderness. The group travelled by train and truck before skiing deep into the mountains, recording their progress in photographs and journals that would later become vital pieces of evidence. Those images show laughing faces, snow-covered forests, and the quiet determination of students eager to conquer one of the most difficult winter routes in the Soviet Union. The journey proceeded normally through the final days of January. Camps were established among dense forests where the wind remained manageable, and diary entries described routine travel through snowdrifts and frozen rivers. Yet on February 1st, 1959, something forced the group to change its plans. Instead of descending into a sheltered valley, the hikers pitched their tent on an exposed slope of a mountain known as Kholat Syakhl. In the language of the indigenous Mansi people, the name carries a chilling translation: Mountain of the Dead. Whether the decision resulted from poor visibility or simple miscalculation remains uncertain, but it placed the expedition directly in the path of the region's brutal winds. When Dyatlov and his companions failed to return on schedule, concerns slowly grew back in Sverdlovsk. At first, there was little alarm since delays were common in winter expeditions, but by late February, the absence became impossible to ignore. Search teams made up of volunteers, students, soldiers, and local guides began combing the mountains. Aircraft scanned the snowy slopes while rescue groups moved through forests on skis. Days passed without success until February 26th, when searchers spotted a partially collapsed tent protruding from the snow on the slope of Kholat Syakhl. What they found at the campsite immediately puzzled investigators. The tent was badly damaged, with several long cuts slashed through the fabric from the inside. Boots, coats, and other essential gear remained inside, as though the occupants had fled suddenly without time to dress for the freezing temperatures outside. The scene suggested panic rather than an orderly evacuation. Footprints leading away from the tent were visible in the snow, forming a trail that descended toward a nearby forest roughly 1.5 kilometers away. Strangely, those tracks indicated that some of the hikers had walked barefoot or wearing only socks. Following the footprints into the trees, searchers discovered the first bodies beneath a large cedar tree. Yuri Krivonischenko and Yuri Doroshenko lay near the remnants of a small fire that had burned briefly before dying out. Both men were dressed lightly despite the brutal cold, and branches high in the cedar showed signs that someone had climbed the tree, perhaps attempting to look back toward the distant tent. A short distance away, rescuers found Igor Dyatlov himself, lying face down in the snow as though he had been trying to return uphill to the campsite. Over the following weeks, the search uncovered 3 more bodies scattered between the cedar tree and the tent. Rustem Slobodin, Zinaida, Kolmogorova, and Dyatlov all appeared to have been moving toward the camp when they collapsed. Their clothing suggested they had gradually taken garments from the first victims in an attempt to survive the cold. Yet 4 members of the expedition remained missing. It was not until May, after the snow began to melt, that search teams discovered them buried beneath several meters of snow in a ravine deeper within the forest. The final discovery introduced even more unsettling details. The bodies of Lyudmila Dubinina, Alexander Zolotaryov, Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, and Semyon Zolotaryov showed severe internal injuries that investigators compared to the force of a car crash. Thibault-Brignol had suffered a fractured skull, while Dubinina and Zolotaryov had broken ribs. Dubinina's body also lacked her tongue and parts of soft tissue, a detail that later fueled endless speculation. Yet the strange injuries appeared without corresponding external wounds, leaving forensic examiners struggling to explain how such damage could occur in the remote wilderness. Soviet authorities opened a formal investigation, but the case soon became clouded by confusion and secrecy. Some reports mentioned traces of radiation detected on certain items of clothing, although the significance of those findings remained unclear. Witnesses in nearby regions later described unusual lights in the sky during the same period, raising questions about whether the hikers had witnessed some unknown aerial phenomenon. Several documents connected to the investigation were later classified, a decision that deepened suspicions about what might have occurred in the mountains that night. Even investigators involved in the original search admitted years later that certain details never made their way into the final report. Some rescuers later recalled that the atmosphere surrounding the search felt strangely tense, as though certain questions were being quietly discouraged. Others noted that information about the expedition circulated in fragments rather than clear statements, leaving many details buried in unofficial accounts and private recollections. As the years passed, those missing pieces only deepened the sense that the full story of what happened on that slope was never completely revealed. For decades afterward, the Dyatlov Pass tragedy remained shrouded in speculation. Avalanche theories, secret military tests, katabatic winds, and encounters with unknown animals have all been proposed to explain the sudden flight from the tent. Researchers have examined the hikers' diaries, photographs, and autopsy reports with relentless attention, yet no single explanation resolves every detail. Even modern analyses that suggest a small slab avalanche triggered the escape struggle to explain why the group cut open their tent, or why some victims suffered such unusual injuries. Today, the lonely slope where the expedition made its final camp bears the name Dyatlov Pass, officially adopted in memory of the young leader who never returned from the mountains. Travelers who visit the site find only wind, snow, and the distant silhouettes of the Ural ridges stretching toward the horizon. The forest below still stands where rescuers first discovered the bodies in 1959, its branches creaking quietly under the weight of Siberian winters that have passed without answers. And somewhere on that frozen mountainside, the silence still holds the secret of what drove 9 experienced hikers into the darkness of the Siberian night. The Tunguska explosion. Dawn settled quietly over the vast Siberian taiga on the morning of June 30th, 1908, when an event later known as the Tunguska explosion shattered the silence of one of the most remote regions on Earth. Residents in scattered villages described an intense light cutting across the horizon, a fireball brighter than the sun that left the sky glowing with unnatural colours. Few could have imagined what had entered their airspace, yet those who looked upward sensed immediately that something extraordinary and terrifying was unfolding. This single sudden occurrence would later become one of the most disturbing, unsolved phenomena in Siberian history, challenging observers and scientists for decades. Without warning, a brilliant object tore across the sky above central Siberia, blazing so intensely that witnesses later said the sun itself seemed to be moving across the horizon. Those who saw it reported a streak of light travelling at impossible speed, followed by a roar that rolled across the forests and rivers. Children were pulled from the rivers in alarm, and livestock scattered in every direction as the atmosphere itself seemed to tremble. The sensation was unlike any storm, earthquake, or volcanic eruption. It belonged to something entirely alien, a force both awe-inspiring and incomprehensible to those who witnessed it. Moments later, a violent shockwave surged outward through this wilderness, knocking people off their feet in distant villages and rattling windows hundreds of kilometers away. Trees bent and snapped like twigs under a force that defied imagination, leaving patterns of devastation that stretched for miles in every direction. Dogs howled and disappeared into the forests, while fires ignited in random patches along the riverbanks. Eyewitnesses later described the ground vibrating as if the earth itself had shuddered beneath the impact, yet no crater was found in the immediate area, leaving an early, unanswered puzzle about the event's origin. Far beyond the scattered settlements of the region, an immense stretch of forest near the Podkamanaya-Tunguska River absorbed the full force of the blast. Over 80 million trees were flattened across more than 2,000 square kilometers, all pointing outward from a central point, their trunks snapped and scorched. Vegetation that survived bore twisted branches and burnt bark, a grotesque testament to a force that seemed simultaneously destructive and precise. The scale of the destruction suggested a phenomenon that was neither an ordinary storm nor lightning, but something far more extraordinary, leaving the forest silent and uninhabitable in its immediate aftermath. When explorers eventually reached the devastated area years later, they discovered something that only deepened the mystery. Despite the obliteration, there was no traditional crater where the blast had originated, no fragment of meteorite large enough to account for the scale of devastation, and no clear point of entry. Soil samples and tree cores suggested intense heat had passed through the area, but even those hints were inconsistent with known meteor impacts. The juxtaposition of total forest devastation without a visible impact point baffled early researchers, setting the stage for decades of speculation and scientific investigation. Accounts gathered from local Evenki hunters and settlers described a terrifying scene in which the sky erupted in fire before the ground trembled beneath them. People reported hearing a rolling thunder that followed the flash, and many claimed to see a column of smoke rising high into the atmosphere, darkening the sky for hours. Some attempted to flee while others froze in place, overwhelmed by the scale and intensity of what they had witnessed. These testimonies, collected years later, painted a picture of a disaster that was at once tangible, frightening and impossible to reconcile with ordinary experience. For nearly 2 decades after the explosion, the heart of the disaster remained almost entirely unexplored by scientists. The remoteness of central Siberia, combined with the vastness of the destroyed forest, delayed any formal investigation. Researchers could only rely on oral histories and sporadic accounts from travellers and villagers, none of which could fully convey the immensity of the event. Maps were incomplete, and the riverine landscape made traversal difficult even for seasoned explorers, leaving the Tunguska region largely untouched except for scattered traces of human observation. During the spring of 1927, Russian mineralogist Leonid Kulik finally led an expedition into the remote taiga to examine the strange reports of a flattened forest. Kulik and his team navigated rivers, dense woods, and swampy ground to reach the epicenter, documenting a scene of unimaginable destruction. From a distance, the trees appeared to radiate outward, like spokes on a wheel, forming an almost geometric pattern. Kulik measured tree trunks, photographed scorched stumps, and collected soil and vegetation samples, all in an attempt to piece together what force had caused such devastation. Standing within the ruined landscape, Kulik observed a pattern of destruction that appeared both immense and strangely precise. Some trees were completely stripped of branches, while nearby trees remained standing but scorched, suggesting the passage of a highly directional shockwave. No fragments of a large object were found, but small metallic and mineral anomalies later drew scientific attention. Kulik's notes hinted at an aerial explosion of extraordinary magnitude, a hypothesis that, while plausible, left many details unresolved, particularly the absence of a crater or large meteoric fragments. As scientific reports began circulating across Europe and Russia, new questions emerged about unusual atmospheric effects recorded in the days following the explosion. Observatories noted strange noctilucent clouds, and glowing skies were reported thousands of kilometers from the blast site. Some speculated that the explosion had injected material into the upper atmosphere, affecting sunsets and air luminescence across the continent. These phenomena lent the event a sense of cosmic scale, suggesting a force that reached far beyond the Siberian wilderness and into the very layers of the atmosphere itself. Modern researchers studying the Tunguska event have gradually assembled a clearer picture of what may have happened high above the Siberian forest. A meteoroid or comet fragment likely exploded mid-air, releasing energy equivalent to several megatons of TNT. The blast flattened forests, ignited fires, and created a shockwave that was felt across Europe. Yet even with advanced modelling and decades of study, details such as the exact composition of the body, its angle of entry, and the mechanisms behind the observed atmospheric phenomena remain partially unresolved. The Tunguska explosion retains a quality of awe, reminding us of the fragile boundary between human understanding and the vast, unpredictable forces of nature. At present, the forests along the Podkamennaya-Tunguska River have largely grown back, covering the scars of an explosion that once shook the atmosphere across half a continent. Sparse trails and occasional scientific markers are the only reminders that a violent event occurred there over a century ago. Travellers moving through the taiga find no evidence of the original devastation at first glance, yet subtle patterns of tree growth and soil variation hint at the magnitude of what once transpired. The region's remoteness preserves a quiet, haunting emptiness, as though the forest itself remembers what happened and waits for humanity to comprehend it fully. Yet more than a century later, the empty sky above that quiet stretch of Siberia still leaves one question unanswered about what truly arrived there that morning. The Potomsky Crater Enigma. Deep in the northern reaches of Irkutsk Oblast, a strange mound rises from the Siberian taiga, its conical form marking the location now known as the Potomsky Crater, first reported by explorers in 1949. Hidden among rolling hills and dense pine forests, it is a feature both striking and incongruous, appearing abruptly in an otherwise flat expanse of Siberian wilderness. The region is remote, accessible only by days of travel along narrow logging trails or river routes, and for decades the crater remained largely untouched, except for the cautious interest of passing geologists. Its discovery stirred immediate curiosity, a formation so unusual that even early reports described it as unnatural, defying the familiar patterns of the landscape. The crater measures nearly 100 meters across, its shattered limestone fragments and dense peat creating an irregular, almost sculpted surface that defies simple explanation. The mound rises roughly 12 meters above the surrounding terrain, its sides composed of broken rock, soil and compressed vegetation, forming a rough cone that seems to have emerged spontaneously. Measurements taken decades later confirmed the irregularity of its shape: concentric layers, radial fissures, and a base wider than typical meteoric formations. No surrounding ejecta typical of volcanic or impact activity was found, leaving researchers perplexed about the energy and processes necessary to create such a structure. The sheer scale of the mound suggests an origin both violent and precise, yet the mechanism remains unknown. When geologists first ventured to the site, they approached cautiously, noting the isolation and the eerie quiet that hung over the forest, as if the land itself were holding a secret. In the early 1950s, researchers from the Irkutsk Geological Institute navigated rivers and bogs to reach the mound, recording observations in journals filled with sketches, measurements, and photographs. They noted the stark contrast between the crater and the surrounding taiga, as if the formation had been deposited rather than grown. Those who walked the perimeter reported a strange feeling of heaviness in the air, a subtle sense that the forest's silence carried a weight of unresolved phenomena. Even seasoned geologists admitted that the site evoked both fascination and unease, as if human logic could only partially comprehend what lay before them. Close inspection revealed unusual rock formations and concentric layers of debris, patterns that seemed deliberate yet could not be matched to any known natural process in the region. The limestone blocks appeared fractured along angular planes, while smaller fragments filled gaps in the cone as though arranged by some unseen hand. The peat around the mound displayed compression layers inconsistent with natural sedimentation, and the perimeter of the crater included small ridges radiating outward like spokes. Even the soil composition was abnormal. Some layers were unusually dense, while others contained minerals in ratios not seen in nearby terrain. Every observation reinforced the sense that the crater was the product of a force or event entirely unfamiliar to contemporary geologists. Theories emerged almost immediately: meteorite impact, underground gas explosion, volcanic activity, and even experimental weaponry, though no evidence conclusively supported any one explanation. The meteorite hypothesis was compelling due to the mound's conical shape, but no large fragments were ever recovered. Suggestions of subterranean explosions relied on hypothetical gas pockets, yet no measurable cavities could be located. Speculation about volcanic processes failed because the area has no history of volcanism, and temperatures in the rock did not indicate molten intrusion. Each theory explained only fragments of the phenomenon, leaving the origin of the crater an enduring question in scientific literature. Later expeditions in the 1960s and 1970s employed early geophysical techniques, detecting anomalous density and magnetism beneath the mound that baffled even the most experienced geologists. Measurements with rudimentary magnetometers revealed unusual readings in the central core, while seismic surveys hinted at irregular layering beneath the surface. Rock samples analysed for composition showed unexpected concentrations of iron and titanium in some fragments, though the quantities were too small to indicate a meteorite. Every new dataset seemed to expand the mystery, demonstrating that while the mound could be described in terms of shape and material, its formation could not be reproduced or explained by conventional geological processes. Local Evenki hunters spoke of unusual phenomena: the ground trembling without a quake, distant flashes of light, and the occasional low hum that seemed to emanate from beneath the forest floor. Though anecdotal, these accounts persisted over generations and were collected by field researchers as they attempted to understand local perception of the crater. Witnesses described sensations of heat, faint odours of sulphur, and the occasional small fires among the peat, though none could identify a cause. For many, the mound was more than a geological anomaly. It was an enigmatic presence within a landscape already marked by remoteness and isolation. Scientists examining these accounts found themselves frustrated, as conventional geology could neither replicate the formations nor explain the anomalies recorded in samples of soil and rock. Attempts to reconcile the crater with volcanic, meteorite, or man-made activity failed repeatedly. Each expedition returned with detailed observations, but no unifying explanation, creating a tension between the meticulous clarity of measurement and the persistent sense that the mound was outside the natural order. Some researchers speculated that the crater might be unique to earthly processes, while others quietly entertained the possibility of forces yet to be understood by science. Modern aerial surveys and satellite imagery revealed subtle disturbances in the surrounding landscape, with tree growth and sediment patterns hinting at forces that had altered the terrain long before humans arrived. Vegetation near the mound appeared slightly stunted, or unusually aligned in concentric arcs, and soil composition patterns visible from above suggested unusual subsurface movement. Geospatial analysis confirmed that the mound occupies a slightly elevated position relative to the surrounding terrain, further complicating theories of natural formation. These observations, when combined with historical reports and ground surveys, create a layered picture of a site that is both tangible and resistant to complete explanation. Even the forest itself seemed peculiar. Twisted trunks, peat compression in unusual layers, and micro-topographical shifts suggested that some invisible force had left an enduring impression on the land. Explorers reported subtle differences in sound and light when approaching the mound, noting that birds and small animals behaved unusually near its perimeter. The forest appeared older than expected in some sections, and younger in others, as if the crater had somehow influenced the natural cycles of growth. These subtle distortions added an atmospheric weight to scientific observation, lending the site a feeling of almost conscious enigma. Decades of study have produced meticulous measurements and countless papers, yet the Potomsky crater continues to defy full understanding, standing as an enduring puzzle in Siberian geology. every new expedition confirms the same core truths. The mound exists, it is composed of unusual material, and no single theory satisfactorily explains its origin. Researchers continue to debate, analyze, and return, driven as much by curiosity as by the undeniable allure of a mystery that refuses to yield. Each visit confirms that the formation is not merely an anomaly, but a persistent riddle hidden within the Siberian wilderness. Visitors today find the mound partially overgrown, rising silently among pine and birch, its origin remaining elusive and its presence a subtle reminder of forces the earth may conceal indefinitely. Trails winding through the forest give the impression of gentle slopes and ordinary vegetation, yet each step closer to the crater reveals subtle anomalies. Twisted bark, unusual depressions, layers of rock that do not belong. The air carries a quiet stillness, as though the landscape itself is aware of its own secret. For those who pause and observe, the Potomsky crater evokes a mix of wonder, unease, and the sense that the natural world has withheld its full story. No matter how thoroughly it is measured or studied, the Potomsky crater keeps its secrets buried beneath the Siberian forest, leaving one to wonder what truly created this enigmatic formation. The Kamardaban hiking disaster. The hikers stepped into the shadowed trails of the Kamardaban range, unaware that the dense forest and jagged ridges ahead would soon test the limits of endurance and survival. Nestled in southern Siberia, the range stretches in a series of steep ridges and narrow valleys, its slopes blanketed with dark pine, birch, and Siberian larch. Trails twist between boulders and thick undergrowth, and the isolation is compounded by weather that can shift abruptly. In 1993, a group of hikers embarked on this route, expecting an adventurous trek, but encountering conditions that would leave an unsettling legacy. The region is not notorious for accidents, yet the disaster that unfolded would come to haunt both the mountains and those who study them. Morning air was crisp, yet hints of unstable weather drifted across the peaks, while the narrow paths carved through pines and birch threatened hidden obstacles at every turn. The group had prepared carefully, bringing maps, compasses, and climbing gear, yet even the most detailed planning could not mitigate the effects of the terrain itself. Snow patches lingered unexpectedly in shaded depressions, and the sun's angle made certain slopes appear deceptively flat. Even experienced hikers noted the subtle difficulties in navigating the uneven ground, as roots and loose rocks created a continuous challenge underfoot. The mountains, silent and watchful, seemed to test each step before the disaster had fully revealed itself. By mid-afternoon, subtle warnings began to emerge. Sudden gusts that shifted without pattern, birds scattering nervously, and the distant rumble of shifting stones echoing down steep slopes. A chill wind cut through the canopy, bending young trees and carrying a faint, unusual scent of damp mineral soil. Hikers paused to assess conditions, noting the speed with which clouds had gathered over the peaks and the uneasy stillness that followed each gust. Wildlife, often a silent companion in these woods, had vanished from immediate view, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. Each sensory cue, ordinary on its own, combined to suggest that the mountains were preparing the group for something beyond routine hardship. Before the group could adjust, an unexpected storm swept over the ridges, turning visibility to near zero and forcing hikers to scramble for shelter among rocks and dense undergrowth. Rain turned to hail in minutes, and the temperature dropped sharply as clouds pressed low against the peaks. Equipment meant to protect them was challenged by both wind and sudden precipitation, and the hikers' pace slowed as caution replaced confidence. Mist and low-hanging clouds obscured landmarks, and the sounds of rushing water in nearby gullies amplified the sense of isolation. The forest, which had appeared welcoming in the morning light, transformed into an unpredictable labyrinth that offered neither comfort nor certainty. Confusion spread quickly as the group lost sight of one another. Paths became indistinguishable, and each decision seemed to pull them deeper into an unfamiliar labyrinth of shadowed terrain. In the dense forest, even familiar trails became unrecognizable, and landmarks used to orient themselves were hidden behind layers of mist and snow. Small groups formed and dissolved spontaneously, with each hiker attempting to navigate towards safety while maintaining awareness of the rest. Anxiety and fatigue began to shape decisions more than knowledge or experience, and minor miscalculations compounded the dangers posed by the terrain. The mountain, indifferent and expansive, seemed to play a quiet but decisive role in the unfolding events. Exhaustion set in alongside sharp cold, with some hikers suffering injuries from hidden roots and rocks, and the creeping onset of hypothermia began to cloud judgment and coordination. Hands and feet went numb despite gloves and insulated boots, and weakened muscles struggled against even gentle slopes. Improvised shelters offered minimal respite, and the group's morale faltered as the day progressed. Food and water, carefully rationed at departure, were consumed faster than anticipated due to exertion and stress. Each hiker's condition varied. Some retained enough strength to move steadily, while others lagged, increasingly vulnerable to both environmental exposure and accidental injury. When rescuers finally reached the first victims, the scene was disorienting. Hikers scattered across steep inclines, partially sheltered by natural formations, their clothing and equipment bearing marks of sudden struggle. Some had fallen into shallow depressions, while others clung to boulders or tree roots for stability. Injuries were consistent with slips and hypothermic collapse, yet the distribution of bodies suggested moments of frantic movement or attempts to assist companions. The forest's quiet, once a protective veil, now amplified the eeriness of the scene, as though the mountains themselves had absorbed the chaos before the rescuers arrived. Documentation of positions, clothing, and equipment indicated a mixture of calm navigation interrupted by sudden panic. Search parties documented the landscape carefully, noting the absence of signs that might indicate panic-driven flight, yet discrepancies in locations and conditions defied conventional expectations. Footprints led in confusing directions, sometimes doubling back or vanishing entirely into moss-covered slopes. Fallen branches and disturbed soil appeared in patterns inconsistent with natural passage or simple storms. Rescue teams measured distances between individuals and noted varying exposure to wind and cold, revealing inconsistencies that could not be easily explained by geography alone. The meticulous records left investigators with more questions than answers, compounding the sense that the disaster was more than a simple misfortune of terrain or weather. Investigators recorded anomalies, footprints abruptly ending in snowdrifts, slight scorch marks on rocks, and injuries inconsistent with simple falls or exposure, all contributing to the enigma. Equipment was found in unusual configurations, suggesting that hikers had taken actions prompted by sudden and unexpected events. Some medical reports indicated frostbite accompanied by minor contusions, though no evidence explained the pattern fully. While many aspects of the incident could be attributed to severe weather, others remained mysterious, hinting at rapid localized hazards or psychological effects induced by stress and fear. Each anomaly reinforced the sense that the mountains held secrets beyond ordinary comprehension. Experts debated theories ranging from abrupt microclimatic storms and rapid avalanches to unanticipated ice or rock shifts, yet none could account for every irregularity observed at the site. Some argued that localized wind patterns combined with narrow ridges could produce sudden and lethal conditions. Others suggested that minor landslides or rolling boulders contributed to injuries. Hypothermia and panic-induced separation explained portions of the outcomes, yet gaps in timing, movement, and physical evidence persisted. The challenge lay in reconciling natural explanations with human behavior, leaving the disaster as a puzzle where environment and psychology intersected in unpredictable ways. Survivors and experienced mountaineers alike have reflected on the unpredictability of the Khmer terrain, emphasizing the thin boundary between skill and disaster in these isolated Siberian peaks. Accounts describe the mountains as deceptively calm, with hidden dangers lurking behind every ridge and tree line. Experienced guides note that even small miscalculations in timing, navigation, or exposure can have cascading consequences in these conditions. The stories of hikers who survived minor incidents, only to be caught off guard by sudden weather, reinforce a persistent tension between human confidence and natural indifference. These reflections underscore the mountain's role not just as a backdrop, but as an active agent in the unfolding of events. The mountain trails where the hikers vanished remain cloaked in shadow and silence, as moss and pine needles gradually reclaim the slopes, while memories of that ill-fated expedition persist among rocks and ridges. Hiking parties now approach the area with caution, aware of both documented incidents and the unrecorded hazards that persist along steep ridges. The paths themselves appear ordinary, yet demand constant vigilance, with the terrain subtly reminding each traveller of past calamities. Trees sway with a quiet, almost knowing rhythm, and the wind carries a faint echo of movement long past. The forest retains its secrets, holding them close beneath layers of soil, vegetation and memory. The Kamardaban Mountains, quiet and imposing, continue to guard the secrets of that disastrous hike, leaving only unanswered questions for those who dare to tread its slopes. The missing Romanov gold of Siberia. In the chaotic days following the Russian Revolution, trains and river convoys carried gold and valuables deep into Siberia, their final destinations often cloaked in secrecy and political urgency. Imperial treasures removed from urban centres like Petrograd and Moscow were shuffled to avoid capture by advancing Bolshevik forces or looters. Reports indicate that large shipments were diverted to remote towns and transit points along railways and river routes, leaving a trail marked by only the faintest traces of paper documentation. The immense distances of Siberia and the political instability of the time combined to create conditions where wealth could seemingly vanish overnight, giving rise to a mystery that would linger for decades. Official records hint at storage facilities along the Trans-Siberian routes, warehouses tucked near remote settlements, and convoys that vanished from documentation without explanation. Archives from 1918 to 1922 occasionally mention crates marked as imperial property or gold bullion, yet no consistent chain of custody survives. Telegraphic communications were frequently lost, intercepted, or destroyed during the Civil War, leaving gaps in the paper trail. Even partial records reveal the extraordinary logistical effort required to transport wealth through Siberia's vast forests, icy rivers, and underdeveloped roads, emphasizing both the opportunity for misplacement and the deliberate concealment of information. Conflicting accounts emerged almost immediately: shipments that never arrived, guards who disappeared, and reports of cargo diverted under obscure orders, leaving historians with only fragments of evidence. Some convoys were reportedly rerouted to alternative locations under last-minute instructions, while others supposedly arrived at depots that later could not confirm their reception. Eyewitnesses occasionally remembered trains or barges laden with metal crates, but their recollections were often inconsistent, highlighting the confusion of the time. Such discrepancies make it difficult to reconstruct the gold's journey or identify whether the disappearance was accidental, intentional, or a combination of both. Local villagers recalled sudden visits by officials, crates being loaded under the cover of night, and whispered instructions to remain silent about unusual activity in forests or along rivers. In some cases, entire neighbourhoods reported observing men in uniform moving heavy cargo in secrecy, while others claimed to see them disappear into snow-covered valleys or thick taiga. Tales of concealed caches, sometimes buried or hidden in abandoned buildings, became a regular part of local storytelling. These accounts, though anecdotal, suggest that knowledge of the treasure was highly compartmentalized, deliberately obscured, and possibly known to only a few key actors at each stage of transport. Siberia itself became an obstacle, its dense taiga, winding rivers, and frozen landscapes concealing the movements of men and treasure alike, challenging even the most determined seekers. Rivers that appeared navigable on maps could be blocked by ice or shifting sediment, forcing convoys to halt or take unmarked detours. Forested valleys concealed activities from casual observers, while snowstorms could render even familiar terrain unrecognizable. Even in summer, mosquitoes, swamps, and uncharted paths slowed movements, creating both natural and psychological pressure on those responsible for the gold. The geography was not merely a backdrop, but a participant in the disappearance, ensuring that only fragments of information survived. Political interference compounded the mystery, as shifting priorities, bureaucratic secrecy, and deliberate obfuscation erased or contradicted records, leaving gaps that fueled speculation. The Bolsheviks, while eager to claim imperial assets, often redirected resources according to immediate needs rather than systematic accounting. Some warehouses were sealed, destroyed, or repurposed, leaving little evidence of what had been stored there. Orders issued from central authorities often conflicted with the recollections of local administrators, further muddying the historical record. In many ways, the lack of clarity was as effective as concealment, turning Siberia itself into a vault of unanswered questions. Over decades, small fragments of the treasure were recovered, coins buried in soil, caches uncovered by chance, yet each discovery seemed to raise more questions than it answered. In the 1920s and 1930s, locals occasionally unearthed gold bars or coins in abandoned settlements, prompting speculation that these were remnants of larger shipments. Some recovered items matched serial numbers from official imperial inventories, but the locations of discovery offered no clear pattern. Each find attracted attention from authorities, collectors, and historians, yet none led to the full recovery of the missing wealth, leaving the larger enigma intact. Modern expeditions traced the faintest clues, combing archives and landscapes with painstaking care, yet maps, testimonies, and weathered landmarks frequently misled even the most methodical researchers. Teams attempted to follow river courses, reconstruct convoy routes, and interview surviving witnesses or descendants, yet the passage of time had erased many details. Rivers changed course, forests reclaimed abandoned trails, and human memory faded, creating obstacles both literal and figurative. Explorers documented anomalies in terrain and conflicting evidence, reminding them that Siberia could preserve history while simultaneously obscuring it. Rumours grew into legend as stories of hidden vaults and secret river crossings spread among locals, blending reality with folklore and exaggerating the scale of what may have been lost. Tales of entire convoys vanishing overnight, gold hidden beneath frozen rivers, or wealth buried beneath remote hills persisted for generations. Some stories spoke of treacherous ambushes by bandits or rogue factions, while others hinted at deliberate concealment by officials seeking personal gain. The uncertainty allowed imagination to thrive, amplifying the sense that the gold was not merely missing but actively guarding its secrets. Speculation continues regarding the gold's concealment, deliberate destruction, hidden caches in unmarked settlements, or treacherous river routes where it might still lie buried beneath sediment and ice. Some historians suggest that parts of the shipment were intentionally destroyed to prevent seizure, while others theorize that natural hazards, including river floods or landslides, claimed some of the treasure. Combined with intentional obfuscation by authorities, these factors ensure that no single explanation resolves all inconsistencies. Each hypothesis adds layers to the mystery, reinforcing the notion that the treasure's fate is as enigmatic as the Siberian wilderness itself. Historians and treasure hunters alike continue to puzzle over the inconsistencies, aware that Siberia's vastness and history conspire to preserve the unknown while inviting endless speculation. Archives yield tantalizing clues alongside irreconcilable contradictions, while maps hint at potential sites that may no longer exist in their original form. The combination of geography, politics, and time has transformed the disappearance from a straightforward logistical question into a layered historical puzzle. Each attempt to reconstruct events highlights both the ingenuity and the desperation of those involved, while emphasizing the immense difficulty of achieving certainty. The routes that once carried the Romanov wealth through Siberia's forests and rivers remain largely uncharted, leaving the mystery of its disappearance as elusive as the shifting snowdrifts themselves. Remote settlements along rivers and railways still hold the faintest traces of past activity, but the precise locations of convoys, caches, and storage points have been lost to decades of natural and human change. Scholars continue to study fragmented documents, correlating them with oral histories and environmental data, yet the puzzle remains unresolved. Siberia's vastness and inaccessibility ensure that answers may exist, but they remain hidden beneath layers of terrain, time, and secrecy. The Siberian wilderness, silent and unyielding, keeps the Romanov gold's fate hidden, allowing only shadows and rumor to testify to its enduring mystery. The Death Road of Kolyma. Known ominously as the Death Road, the Kolyma Highway stretches across Siberia's frozen expanse, its construction claiming countless lives under conditions that remain difficult to imagine. The road, later designated as M56, became a vital artery linking some of the Soviet Union's most isolated mining regions, yet the cost of its creation is etched into the land and memory. Built primarily by prisoners from the Gulag system, the highway's construction was a monumental human endeavour in an environment that seemed purpose-built to resist survival. Even today, the vast distances, snow-swept valleys, and jagged mountains evoke the relentless hardships endured by those who laboured and perished here, their stories partially erased by time and secrecy. Plans for the road emerged in the early 1930s, as Soviet authorities mobilized forced labor to connect remote gold and mineral deposits with industrial centers and urban markets. Engineers and bureaucrats charted routes across unforgiving terrain, yet little thought was given to the human cost. The state's goal was efficiency, often ignoring the realities of Siberia's climate and geography. Prisoners, rounded up from camps across the region, were subjected to rigorous schedules, expected to dig, blast and haul materials in conditions that left even the hardiest individuals exhausted, sick or dead. The combination of ambition and bureaucracy created a silent machine that relied on human endurance as much as it did on engineering skill. Temperatures plunged well below freezing, rivers froze over while snowstorms swept across mountains, and permafrost made even the simplest excavation a brutal, relentless challenge. Winter could last 9 months, yet labour continued as authorities prioritised the road's completion over human survival. Blizzards buried work sites, obscured pathways, and claimed the lives of those who were caught outdoors without shelter. Permafrost, solid and unyielding, required prisoners to use pickaxes and rudimentary tools to break ground that refused to yield, leaving muscles torn and bodies broken. Every day presented the possibility of frostbite, collapse or death, yet the work marched on under the watchful eyes of overseers who measured success in kilometres of completed roadway rather than lives preserved. Within the labour camps, prisoners lived in wooden barracks barely insulated against the cold, subsisting on meagre rations and enduring disease, exhaustion, and the constant threat of violence. Cholera, typhus, and scurvy were common, spreading rapidly through crowded quarters with minimal medical care. Meals often consisted of watery soup, black bread, or spoiled provisions, forcing prisoners to supplement meagre rations with foraged roots or whatever meagre wildlife they could find. The psychological toll of living under constant surveillance, coupled with the fear of arbitrary punishment or execution, created a state of perpetual dread. Letters from family were rare or censored, leaving many isolated not only physically but emotionally, abandoned to the brutal rhythms of camp life. Work on the road was lethal. Frostbite, collapsing ice, avalanches and accidental falls claimed lives daily, leaving sections of the highway littered with unrecorded casualties. Tools were crude, machinery minimal, and safety measures virtually non-existent. Large rocks, unstable slopes, and sudden snow slides frequently trapped prisoners, with supervisors often forcing comrades to move on, leaving victims behind. Some perished under ice as rivers cracked unexpectedly, while others succumbed to exhaustion mid-hike to work sites. Bodies were sometimes buried hastily in shallow graves, while others disappeared entirely into the surrounding wilderness, creating an enduring enigma of missing individuals. Countless individuals vanished without official notice, and records were inconsistent, destroyed, or deliberately obscured, rendering their final fates unknowable even decades later. Camp ledgers might list dozens of names that appear nowhere else, or assign false transfers to those who had already perished. Historians attempting to quantify the death toll must contend with fragmentary documents and conflicting reports, estimating tens of thousands of lives lost, though no precise figure can be confirmed. Even well-documented sites contain unmarked graves, leaving the landscape itself as a silent witness to the missing, where each snowdrift or moss-covered mound could conceal a forgotten story. Survivors' testimonies recount endless toil, the loss of companions, and the psychological toll of witnessing mass death amid desolate landscapes that seemed indifferent to human suffering. Recollections describe frozen rivers stretching endlessly, cliffs and slopes coated in ice, and endless lines of prisoners working under whip or threat. Memories of camaraderie coexist with horror at the arbitrary nature of survival. Some perished suddenly from exhaustion or exposure, while others endured, leaving survivors burdened with both grief and guilt. The psychological impact of labouring under such conditions created a haunting legacy that persisted long after release, shaping families, communities, and the historical record. Despite the staggering human cost, the road was completed, a feat of engineering overshadowed by the silent accumulation of lives extinguished in its creation. Bridges spanned icy rivers, embankments rose through forests, and the highway itself became a functional route across one of the harshest regions on Earth. Yet every milestone of progress was built atop human suffering, a network of labour and death that left permanent marks both on the terrain and in collective memory. Modern travellers often marvel at the highway's continuity and durability, but beneath the asphalt lie countless untold stories of endurance, pain, and vanished lives. In subsequent years, the highway served industry and transport, yet its remoteness preserved the mystery of the unmarked graves and vanished workers who had forged it through sheer endurance. Even as mining operations expanded and trucks rumbled across the completed road, the landscape retained its capacity to hide, absorb, and erase. Forests reclaimed abandoned campsites, rivers shifted course, and snow covered traces of work sites. The physical isolation mirrored historical obscurity. Absent documentation, incomplete registers, and decaying records ensured that many individuals who contributed to the road would remain anonymous, their fates known only to the frozen land. Historians, journalists, and modern travellers continue to study Kolyma, piecing together incomplete archives and oral histories to reconstruct the scale of labour and loss. Expeditions combine archival research with fieldwork, identifying ruins of barracks, remnants of tools, and traces of roads partially abandoned or redirected. Survivors' descendants provide oral histories that fill gaps the official record cannot. Yet even these accounts conflict and diverge, creating a layered mosaic of uncertainty. Each attempt to reconstruct events emphasizes both the extraordinary scale of the enterprise and the tragic inefficiency with which human lives were expended. Even with extensive research, the total number of deaths and the precise locations of burial sites remain unresolved, leaving gaps in both history and memory. The enormity of the region, combined with the passage of decades, ensures that definitive answers are likely unattainable. Snowdrifts conceal shallow graves, forests overtake former camp areas, and rivers sweep away traces of human presence. Each attempt to locate precise burial sites highlights the interplay between Siberia's geography and historical obfuscation, reinforcing the sense that much of the road's human story is irretrievably lost to time. At present, the road winds silently through mountains and frozen forests, a stark reminder of human ambition, cruelty, and the countless stories buried beneath Siberia's snow and ice. Travellers driving along its stretches encounter dense forests, icy river crossings, and isolated settlements, evoking a mixture of awe and unease. Remnants of gulag labour, from collapsed barracks to rusting equipment, serve as sombre markers of the human cost. The highway's existence is both a testament to engineering perseverance and a memorial to those whose lives were expended in the relentless pursuit of a state-driven goal. Its presence in the Siberian wilderness continues to challenge visitors with both beauty and dread. The wind over the Kolyma highway carries whispers of those who vanished, their fates obscured by time, terrain, and the secrets of a brutal past. The Vitim River Fireball. On a crisp September evening in 2002, residents along the Vitim River reported a blinding fireball streaking across the Siberian sky, followed by a thunderous boom that seemed to shake the surrounding forests. The fiery object moved rapidly from north to south, illuminating the dense taiga and casting long, flickering shadows across the river. For many, it was an impossible spectacle, an enormous ball of light that appeared suddenly and vanished just as quickly. Local newspapers carried sparse accounts, and scientists received scattered reports that hinted at both awe and fear. The event left a profound impression on the inhabitants of this remote region, who had seen little that could rival the fiery spectacle and deafening sound that ripped through the evening air. The Vitim River region, with its dense forests, jagged hills, and near total isolation, amplified both the spectacle and the fear as locals struggled to comprehend an event that seemed to defy explanation. Settlements were few and far between, and communication was limited to radio transmissions or infrequent postal services. The isolation heightened the sense of vulnerability as the fireball passed silently over the wilderness, leaving only glimpses of its brilliance to be interpreted. For those who witnessed it, the experience was disorienting. The sky seemed transformed, and the familiar contours of the landscape became strange and otherworldly, illuminated in unearthly hues that no natural fire or human construction could replicate. Observers described the fireball as brilliant and unusually large, trailing a luminous tail and accompanied by intense heat and a shockwave that rattled windows and doors miles away. Some reported the sensation of air pressure shifting, like an invisible hand sweeping across the taiga, while others felt vibrations through the ground. Animals reacted strangely. Dogs howled and birds flew frantically into the night, adding a layer of unease. The suddenness of the event, combined with its size and intensity, left residents struggling to quantify what they had seen, relying instead on instinct and the fragmented memories of those around them. Even those who had never seen such a phenomenon before understood that it was extraordinary. Fear rippled through small villages as people rushed outside, shielding themselves from falling debris, attempting to track the object's descent and calling neighbours to recount what they had seen. Groups formed spontaneously along riverbanks and hilltops, each person pointing to the sky and exchanging hurried observations. Fires from hearths illuminated startled faces, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and anxiety. Some residents attempted to capture the phenomenon with cameras or binoculars, though the speed and brilliance of the fireball rendered such efforts largely ineffective. Conversations blended awe with alarm, as speculation spread rapidly through communities already accustomed to isolation and harsh environmental conditions. Teams of researchers later tried to reconstruct the incident using seismic instruments, satellite data, and atmospheric readings, yet no definitive impact site could be verified. Seismographs recorded faint tremors that could have been associated with the event, but no conclusive correlation was made. Satellites captured fleeting imagery of a bright object moving through the upper atmosphere, yet cloud cover and the speed of the fireball prevented detailed analysis. Meteorologists and astronomers examined pressure waves and atmospheric disturbances, but the results remained inconclusive. Each attempt to measure or locate the phenomenon provided fragments of evidence, enough to affirm its occurrence but insufficient to explain its origin or consequences. Experts debated whether it was a meteoroid, fragmented space debris, or a rare atmospheric explosion, each theory contested by incomplete data and conflicting reports from different observers. Some proposed that it was a piece of a disintegrating asteroid, small enough to avoid catastrophic impact but large enough to create an intense visual display and shockwave. Others suggested man-made debris from satellites or rockets, which would explain certain characteristics but not others, particularly the unusual brightness and speed. A few researchers speculated on atmospheric phenomena akin to a bolide explosion, but even these hypotheses lacked corroborating data. The multiplicity of explanations reflected both the complexity of the event and the challenges of conducting research in such a remote location. The surrounding forest bore subtle signs of disturbance: singed trees, small scorch marks, and faint impressions in the snow, but nothing that fully explained the scale or origin of the event. Investigators who travelled to the site found no large crater or obvious fragments of the object, and no consistent pattern in the minor damage observed. Trees with blackened bark stood alongside completely untouched neighbours, suggesting localised effects that were both random and uneven. Snowdrifts revealed faint depressions, perhaps caused by falling debris, but these were difficult to verify and often contradicted by eyewitness accounts. Nature seemed to have absorbed the event, leaving behind only scattered, ambiguous traces for human eyes to interpret. Descriptions varied dramatically. Some villagers recalled a slow, burning descent while others perceived a sudden flash, and discrepancies in timing and trajectory added layers of mystery. Even accounts from the same village differed in their details, with some emphasizing the object's brilliance and others focusing on its speed. Observers struggled to reconcile their memories with those of neighbours, creating a mosaic of impressions that hinted at something extraordinary, yet impossible to quantify precisely. These inconsistencies frustrated scientists seeking data and added to the mystique of the fireball, reinforcing the sense that a definitive explanation might forever remain elusive. Comparable events in Siberia's past, unexpected explosions and fiery sky objects, provide context, yet the Vitim fireball remains singular in its intensity and the lasting uncertainty surrounding it. While the Tunguska event of 1908 looms large in historical memory and sporadic meteor sightings occur frequently, nothing has approached the vividness and localized impact of the Vitim incident in recent decades. The combination of intense brightness, audible shockwave, and subtle environmental effects created a unique episode, one that resists simple categorization and continues to intrigue both scientists and lay observers. Its place in Siberian history is enigmatic, bridging folklore, eyewitness testimony, and modern investigative methods. Remote terrain and harsh weather limited detailed scientific examination, leaving many questions unresolved as investigators contended with the sheer inaccessibility of the affected region. Dense forests, rugged hills, and limited infrastructure slowed expeditions, while winter snow and spring thaw complicated repeated visits. By the time research teams could systematically survey the area, much of the snow and ice had melted, potentially erasing or obscuring traces of the event. These challenges ensured that only partial records and fragmentary physical evidence were ever collected, leaving the phenomenon suspended between observation and speculation. The precise nature of the object, its energy and its path through the atmosphere, continue to puzzle both scientists and residents, forming an enduring enigma in meteorological history. Attempts to model its trajectory and potential impact have yielded a range of plausible scenarios, yet none account fully for the combination of brightness, sonic effects, and minor environmental disturbances. The uncertainty fuels ongoing discussion, debate, and fascination, highlighting the limits of scientific knowledge when confronted with sudden, extreme phenomena in remote regions. The incident endures in local memory, village lore, and scattered scientific notes, a vivid testament to a phenomenon that appeared briefly yet defied comprehension. Stories of the fireball are passed down, intertwined with tales of other strange lights and sounds in Siberia's vast expanse. Researchers and journalists return to the region periodically, collecting testimonies and data, yet the core mystery remains intact. The landscape, silent and expansive, preserves the event in its memory, a fleeting but unforgettable scar in the Siberian sky. The night sky over Vitim still holds its secret, a fleeting blaze that vanished as suddenly as it appeared, leaving only questions suspended in the cold Siberian air. The Valley of Death in Yakutia. In the frozen expanse of Yakutia lies a place whispered about in survival circles as the Valley of Death, where explorers and travelers have vanished under circumstances that defy simple explanation. For centuries, locals and adventurers alike have spoken in hushed tones of sudden disappearances, of footsteps that fade into silence, and of trails that vanish beneath snow and ice. The valley itself seems alive, its terrain unyielding, its weather capricious, and its reputation rooted in countless untold stories. Travelers often report a sense of unease as they approach, as if the land itself anticipates intrusion and responds with quiet menace. Historical records corroborate some of these accounts, providing a chilling testament to the hazards embedded in this remote corner of Siberia. Jagged mountains, winding rivers, and dense forests form an isolated landscape where temperatures plunge without warning, and navigation becomes nearly impossible for the unprepared. Maps often fail to convey the true treachery of the terrain: ice-hidden ravines, slippery boulders, and sudden drop-offs that are invisible until one is perilously close. Snow can fall in unanticipated patterns, erasing trails and confusing even experienced guides. The valley is deceptively beautiful, with crystalline frost glinting on every branch and frozen streams reflecting the pale winter sun. Yet beneath this allure lies a persistent danger that has claimed the lives of those who underestimate it. Accounts from early 20th century expeditions describe groups disappearing into sudden fogs or untraceable paths, leaving only scattered belongings behind. In several instances, supplies and equipment were found abandoned, sometimes half buried in snow or perched precariously on rocky outcrops, with no indication of why or how their owners vanished. Witnesses often reported a sudden silence descending over the landscape, broken only by the faint rustle of wind through the trees. Letters and diaries from explorers suggest a growing dread as days passed without contact, their final entries hinting at disorientation, fatigue, and an eerie awareness of unseen presences in the wilderness. Documented cases include travelers who were last seen near frozen streams or steep ridges, never to return, with official reports noting an eerie lack of struggle or a clear cause of death. Bodies that were eventually recovered sometimes showed no injuries consistent with falls or wildlife attacks, and hypothermia alone could not account for all anomalies. In certain instances, clothing was found partially removed, a perplexing detail noted in reports but never fully explained. Investigators faced the challenge of piecing together incomplete evidence while contending with the valley's relentless weather, which rapidly erased traces and hindered efforts to understand these enigmatic events. Subarctic storms and unpredictable ice formations have been recorded by meteorologists, showing how nature itself can create life-threatening conditions within moments. Blizzards can materialize within hours, obscuring visibility and creating treacherous footing. Rivers that appear frozen may conceal weak ice capable of swallowing a person whole. Wind chills regularly reach temperatures that cause frostbite within minutes, and sudden temperature swings can disorient even seasoned travellers. While these hazards are measurable, they do not explain the full scope of the valley's reputation, which extends beyond simple climatic danger into the realm of the unexplained. Even experienced guides have found themselves disoriented, demonstrating how human perception can falter amidst endless white plains, dense shadows, and deceptive topography. Landmarks that appear familiar may shift in the snow or become obscured, causing paths to double back upon themselves without the traveller realising it. Compasses and GPS devices are occasionally affected by magnetic anomalies, according to some reports, further confounding navigation. Physical exhaustion compounds the problem, sapping the ability to make rational decisions and increasing the risk of fatal mistakes. The valley's isolation ensures that missteps are rarely witnessed, leaving many mysteries unsolved. Some who survived described hearing unidentifiable sounds, seeing fleeting silhouettes, or feeling sudden chills that seemed out of proportion to the ambient temperature. A whispering wind could be interpreted as voices, while shadows played tricks on the eyes of those trying to move cautiously through the dense underbrush. Survivors often report a sensation of being watched or guided by an unseen force, a subtle but persistent pressure that influences movement and decision-making. These sensations are fleeting, difficult to quantify, and yet they leave a profound impression, blending fear with a heightened awareness of the valley's unforgiving nature. Local folklore speaks of restless spirits and cursed paths, a cultural memory of those who disappeared and the inexplicable events surrounding the valley. Indigenous stories describe the valley as a liminal space where the living and the dead intersect, a place that demands respect and caution. Offerings were traditionally left at its edges, rituals performed to ensure safe passage, and children were warned never to wander alone. These legends, while rooted in culture and superstition, intersect with documented disappearances in ways that suggest a collective acknowledgement of the valley's peril beyond mere environmental hazards. Scientific surveys and government patrols have attempted to map the area and understand the risks, yet many incidents remain unresolved, with evidence either vanished or contradictory. Teams have studied topography, ice patterns, and historical weather data, striving to identify correlations between environmental conditions and fatalities. Despite modern technology, many disappearances continue to defy explanation. The valley's sheer remoteness, combined with its rapid weather shifts, has consistently frustrated thorough investigation, leaving gaps in understanding that perpetuate its eerie reputation. Survivors recount a sensation of being watched, of time stretching, and of sudden exhaustion that overtakes even the fittest travellers, suggesting forces beyond simple natural hazards. They describe unexpected dizziness, hallucinations, and intense disorientation that appear to emerge without warning. In some cases, hikers report seeing what seems to be distant movement or lights, only to find nothing upon investigation. These experiences, repeated across decades and reported in different expeditions, hint at a psychological or environmental effect that remains poorly understood and difficult to document scientifically. Patterns emerge but never fully explain the deaths. Some succumb to cold, others disappear without a trace, and the valley continues to resist definitive interpretation. Scholars note that while weather and terrain are extreme, they cannot account for all anomalies, such as sudden vanishings or bizarre behaviour before deaths. The recurrence of unexplained events over decades suggests that the valley is not merely dangerous, but perhaps unpredictable in ways that challenge human comprehension. Each incident adds another layer to the valley's growing legend, reinforcing its status as one of Siberia's most enigmatic landscapes. The Valley of Death endures as a place both feared and studied, a landscape that preserves the memory of those lost while challenging the limits of human understanding. It stands as a testament to nature's power, human vulnerability, and the persistence of mystery in the harshest environments. Expeditions continue, driven by curiosity, necessity, or daring. Yet every venture reminds participants of the risks that the valley conceals. The stories and accounts collected over decades form a mosaic of fear, awe, and unanswered questions, a narrative that refuses closure. Even now, the valley holds its secrets beneath ice and shadow, daring those who enter to confront its silent and inscrutable power. The Kishtim nuclear disaster cover-up. A pervasive silence hung over the Urals, concealing an event whose magnitude would remain hidden from the world for decades, leaving landscapes and lives forever altered. Villages near the Mayak Production Association, known only at the time as Chelyabinsk 40, were blanketed in secrecy, their inhabitants unaware of the invisible threat creeping through soil, water and air. Locals later recalled strange illnesses, sudden deaths, and unexplained evacuations that were whispered about but never fully explained. Official records were scant, delayed or deliberately obscured, and the full impact of what had occurred was left for later generations to uncover. Yet even in fragments, the disaster spoke to the lethal intersection of human ambition and unacknowledged risk. The Mayak facility, situated in a remote forested region, was a cornerstone of the Soviet nuclear program, tasked with producing plutonium and managing radioactive waste for the growing arsenal of the Cold War. Its isolation was deliberate, intended to shield operations from foreign inspection, civilian scrutiny, and even internal dissent. Roads were poorly maintained, guarded, and often impassable in winter, while marshes and rivers formed natural barriers around the sprawling compound. The facility's secrecy contributed to both its strategic value and the catastrophic consequences of errors within, creating a hidden theatre where human miscalculations could manifest without immediate oversight. The disaster itself originated from a storage tank holding highly radioactive waste, which experienced a chemical explosion powerful enough to release hundreds of tons of radioactive isotopes into the surrounding environment. Cesium-137 and strontium-90 spread across hundreds of square kilometres, contaminating farmland, forests and waterways. The cloud's movement was unpredictable, influenced by wind and temperature inversions, and residents downwind were unknowingly exposed to radiation levels far exceeding safety limits. For years, scientists would attempt to reconstruct the blast's dynamics, relying on fragmented data, anecdotal reports, and early soil analyses, all while grappling with incomplete or misleading information from official sources. Immediate human consequences were devastating, yet obscured by deliberate misinformation. Evacuations were rushed and incomplete, with villagers receiving minimal explanation or guidance. Radiation exposure caused burns, nausea, hair loss, and long-term health effects, including cancer and birth defects. Some families reported entire lineages affected, while others disappeared from official records entirely. Despite these realities, the Soviet state classified the event, limiting knowledge of the scale of casualties both internally and internationally, leaving affected populations in a fog of fear and uncertainty. Secrecy was pervasive. Official reports omitted key details, researchers were restricted, and foreign journalists were kept away from the area. Villagers were warned to speak sparingly and often threatened with reprisal for discussing the incident. Scientific papers addressing the contamination were censored or delayed for decades. Even decades later, inconsistencies between declassified reports, survivor accounts, and environmental studies left many unanswered questions, reinforcing the disaster's mystique and the sense of deliberate concealment. It was a catastrophe not only of radiation, but of information, shaping the narrative as much as the fallout itself. Survivors recalled waking to unusual lights in the night sky, hearing unfamiliar hums or crackles, and sensing a pervasive danger that was invisible yet palpably real. Children played near contaminated rivers, unaware of the invisible particles settling on the soil. Families evacuated with little notice, abandoning possessions and livestock, only to later learn of the contamination zones they had traversed. Memories of hurried departures, whispered warnings, and the eerie quiet of once populated villages created a psychological landscape as hazardous as the physical one. These accounts, often contradictory but consistently unsettling, highlight the human dimension of a disaster defined as much by fear and confusion as by radiation exposure. The surrounding terrain itself absorbed the fallout, creating long-term ecological consequences. Forests, rivers and soil became repositories of radiation, altering plant growth, animal populations, and the viability of farmland. Decades of monitoring revealed zones where trees ceased to flourish, fish populations dwindled, and the land itself seemed unwelcoming to human habitation. Wildlife studies indicated mutations and shortened lifespans among certain species, serving as a living testament to the disaster's reach. The land became a silent witness to human error, a warning etched in ecology and persistent isotopes, emphasizing how disaster extended far beyond human perception and control. Government investigations were conducted internally but remained tightly controlled, producing incomplete or misleading documentation. Reports circulated among high-ranking officials, often omitting the worst outcomes, while field teams worked under secrecy and strict oversight. Some declassified documents reveal attempts to measure radiation exposure and map contamination, but gaps and inconsistencies abound. The meticulous control over information ensured that while some technical data survived, broader awareness of the disaster's consequences was effectively suppressed. The very act of investigation became part of the concealment, layering the mystery atop the tragedy itself. In later decades, independent researchers pieced together the event using a combination of declassified archives, satellite imagery, and interviews with survivors. Discrepancies between Soviet-era reports and observed consequences created a troubling pattern. Official figures undercounted the affected population, downplayed contamination zones, and ignored long-term health outcomes. These efforts revealed both the scope of the disaster and the mechanisms of secrecy, highlighting a dissonance between public knowledge and reality. The reconstruction underscored how the truth, though partially accessible, remained fragmentary, requiring interpretation and inference to approach the full picture. Many questions remain unanswered. Exact casualty figures are elusive, areas of contamination may never have been fully documented, and certain evacuation records have vanished entirely. Scholars continue to debate how much of the region's long-term health crises can be attributed directly to Kishtim, and what social, political, or technological forces allowed such secrecy to persist. The disaster's obscured history raises moral questions about governance, responsibility, and the consequences of prioritizing secrecy over safety, leaving a shadow over the region that cannot be quantified in maps or statistics alone. The psychological impact on local communities persists even decades later, influencing perceptions of safety, trust in authorities, and willingness to inhabit affected areas. Stories of vanished relatives, unexplained illnesses, and environmental decay circulate in whispered warnings, blending with rumors of concealed contamination. Communities adapted in ways both practical and cultural, avoiding certain lands and water sources while constructing narratives that explain the inexplicable. This collective memory, part fear, part legend, shapes the present as much as the past, leaving a lingering tension in the very identity of the affected region. Even with extensive documentation, survivor testimony, and modern environmental studies, the full story of Kishtim remains partly veiled, a testament to the interplay of human error, environmental consequence, and institutional secrecy. Researchers continue to uncover fragments, yet each revelation raises new questions, highlighting the complexity of a disaster intertwined with political imperatives. The landscape itself, both physical and societal, carries the echoes of radiation and suppressed truth, a dual legacy of contamination and concealment. Every effort to comprehend the event underscores how knowledge and secrecy can coexist, leaving the past perpetually unresolved. The Kishtim nuclear disaster endures as both a historical tragedy and a cautionary tale, illustrating how human systems can amplify the consequences of error when fear, secrecy, and ideology dominate. It remains a locus of inquiry, speculation, and quiet dread, where scientific evidence and anecdotal testimony intersect in uneven and sometimes contradictory ways. The valley around Miak continues to bear witness, holding both the remains of radioactive fallout and the more insidious legacy of obfuscation, challenging future generations to disentangle truth from deliberate concealment. Even now, the radioactive cloud of secrecy lingers, obscuring the valley of consequences that no map or report has ever fully revealed. The lost creature of Lake Labinkir. Mist rises from the dark waters of Lake Labinkir, swallowing the shoreline and hinting at a presence unseen, a creature that locals whisper about but few have glimpsed. The lake lies deep within Yakutia, its surface reflecting the muted grey of a sky rarely touched by sunlight. For centuries, this isolated body of water has been shrouded in silence, its remote location deterring outsiders and preserving a veil over whatever may inhabit its depths. Travellers who approach report an eerie stillness, broken only by sudden ripples or the occasional haunting cry of waterfowl, leaving the mind to question what stirs beneath. Even in the height of summer, the water seems impossibly cold, and the reflection of clouds on its surface appears unnaturally distorted, as if concealing something beneath. Generations of Evenki and Yakut fishermen tell stories of sudden ripples and unnatural waves, warning outsiders of a being that eludes explanation and respects no human calendar. Elders describe long, sinuous shapes slicing through water, appearing and disappearing at will. Some accounts suggest a creature with a length and girth far exceeding any known fish or amphibian in the region. These oral histories often intertwine with the rhythm of the lake itself, acknowledging ice cover, seasonal floods, and unexpected storms as part of the creature's habitat. Recollections of small boats suddenly rocking without wind and nets torn by invisible force underscore a persistent unease, a tacit agreement among locals that this is a place best approached with caution and respect. Modern visitors report fleeting glimpses, shadows shifting beneath ice, enormous shapes moving against the current, or the brief flash of scales glinting in rare sunlight. Fishermen occasionally describe equipment being dragged underwater without cause, while travellers record inexplicable splashes near the shore. Cameras catch fleeting blurs, and sonar sometimes detects forms far larger than any recorded species in the lake. Yet each observation proves frustratingly ephemeral, leaving only questions. Photographs are often overexposed or misaligned, and thermal readings suggest heat signatures that vanish when approached, reinforcing the impression that the creature is both present and extraordinarily evasive. Scientific expeditions have arrived with cameras, sonar, and diving equipment, only to encounter ambiguous signals and uncorroborated readings that vanish before verification. Teams from regional universities have documented large sonar returns, but repeated scans yield no physical evidence. Biologists have considered sturgeon, pike, or submerged logs as explanations, yet the reported size, speed, and patterns of movement often defy conventional reasoning. The lake's depth, reaching hundreds of meters in places, combined with dense, cold water, allows anomalies to go undetected, hiding whatever may reside within. Researchers sometimes experience equipment malfunctions or unexpected readings, fueling both frustration and a creeping sense of apprehension about what lies below. The lake's extreme environment compounds mystery, with waters plunging hundreds of meters, temperatures dropping far below freezing, and thick ice sheets hiding its depths for most of the year. In winter, the lake's surface freezes solid, forming a stark, white expanse that conceals the shadows beneath. During brief summer thaws, waves can appear suddenly without wind or visible disturbance. The combination of cold, darkness, and isolation renders detailed study challenging and reinforces the impression that whatever exists in Labinkir moves beyond human reach. Even scientific instruments, carefully calibrated, often fail to detect subtle movements, as if the lake itself resists scrutiny. Skeptics argue that large sturgeon or drifting logs account for most sightings, but anomalies persist that defy easy classification or natural explanation. Sonar scans frequently record shapes far larger than known fish, moving at speeds that no documented species could sustain. Shadows recorded beneath ice appear to shift with intelligence, pausing and circling rather than following currents. While natural explanations account for some phenomena, they fail to encompass all reports, leaving a residue of uncertainty that fuels both scientific curiosity and local legend. Some researchers have speculated about unknown aquatic species, while others suggest a combination of environmental oddities and heightened perception, yet the question remains unresolved. Locals adjust their routines cautiously, leaving boats tied securely and avoiding certain stretches at night, honouring a tradition born of fear, respect, and unproven encounters. Some refuse to fish in particular coves where the water seems to move differently, or where strange currents appear without cause. Nighttime travel is minimised, and families often gather far from the lake's edge, leaving small markers or talismans that, in folklore, offer protection. These practices, blending observation with superstition, underscore the deep impression the lake and its unseen inhabitant have left on daily life. Even seasonal migrations of wildlife seem affected by the lake's subtle patterns, adding layers of uncertainty to the ecosystem and its hidden occupant. Underwater drones and thermal sensors have scanned sections of the lake, detecting movements that suggest life but offering nothing that can be captured, identified, or retrieved. Explorers report shapes that vanish the moment lights are turned toward them, or sudden turbulence that seems unnaturally patterned. Attempts to retrieve samples or track movements consistently fail, leaving only traces of disturbance and speculation. The lake resists analysis, transforming each expedition into a study of uncertainty rather than discovery, as if its depths are a deliberate guardian of secrets. Even sophisticated imaging techniques occasionally produce inexplicable artifacts, further blurring the line between observation and illusion. The psychological tension surrounding the lake is palpable. Every splash, fog bank, or echoing sound reinforces the sense of a hidden force watching silently. Scientists, journalists, and locals alike describe a weight to the air near the water, a subtle impression of being observed. Rumours of lost equipment, sudden illness, or unexplained disappearances mingle with tales of sightings, amplifying unease. This tension is not theatrical but grounded in experience, emerging from a remote, harsh environment where even minor anomalies feel threatening. Nightfall transforms the lake into a realm where visibility is minimal, and imagination fills the spaces between reality and perception, making the creature's presence feel immediate and inescapable. Sonar readings occasionally register shapes too large and fast to match known species, while unusual wave patterns and disturbances rise and vanish before investigators can interpret them. These anomalies are inconsistent but recurring, suggesting that the lake harbours something mobile, possibly intelligent, and certainly unfamiliar. Attempts to triangulate or track movements often fail, as the cold, dark waters absorb and distort signals. Each failed observation deepens the sense of a creature both present and entirely elusive, maintaining an ongoing enigma. Even when no clear evidence emerges, the lake seems to mock human attempts at comprehension, preserving its secrets with deliberate invisibility. Years of careful observation have only deepened the mystery, with each new expedition revealing tantalizing hints that vanish before confirmation, leaving Lake Labinkia's secrets firmly intact. Reports continue to accumulate. Sudden wakes, distorted sonar images, and unusual sounds echoing across ice. Investigators acknowledge the possibility of natural explanations, yet none can account for the full range of observations. With every passing season, the legend of Labinkia's lost creature grows alongside the scientific record, leaving space for both wonder and apprehension. The combination of isolation, climate, and enigmatic sightings sustains a narrative that defies closure, challenging observers to separate truth from perception in a place that actively resists certainty. Each passing season reinforces the enigma, as the lake freezes and thaws, obscuring its secrets while keeping alive a story that continues to intrigue and unsettle all who approach its shores. Researchers return annually, recording, scanning, and observing, only to depart with more questions than answers. The lake remains a locus of uncertainty, its dark waters concealing a presence that teases, disappears, and refuses definition. Those who come seeking proof find themselves confronted instead with enduring mystery, an unyielding intersection of nature, folklore, and unknown life. Visitors leave the area with an impression that something ancient and unseen persists, its influence permeating the still air and icy waters long after they have gone. Beneath the frozen expanse, something stirs that no human eyes have ever fully witnessed, and perhaps never will. The Yeti sightings of the Kuznetsk Alatau. Villagers speak of strange movements in the forest that vanish the moment they are noticed, hinting at a bipedal presence no one has been able to capture. The dense coniferous landscape of the Kuznetsk Alatau, with its steep ridges and tangled undergrowth, makes sudden glimpses almost impossible to verify. People describe subtle shifts in the shadows, brief flashes of dark shapes, and the sound of heavy footsteps that leave no clear trail. Over decades, these accounts have accumulated into a body of local knowledge, a mixture of folklore and lived experience, suggesting that something unusually intelligent and powerful may inhabit the remote woods beyond ordinary understanding. Hunters describe finding enormous footprints pressed into fresh snow, arranged in ways that suggest deliberate, intelligent pacing rather than random wandering. Measurements often exceed 25 centimeters in length, with wide soles and long toes that defy comparison to bears or other large regional animals. The prints sometimes appear in straight lines, as if someone, or something, was navigating with intent, and other times they twist and turn inexplicably, disappearing into dense underbrush. Investigators have occasionally cast the prints, yet even with careful documentation, anomalies remain. Stride lengths, depth, and direction hint at strength and purpose unlike any known wildlife. Each impression raises more questions than answers. Local elders tell stories of a shadowy creature that has existed in the tales of their ancestors, sometimes revered, sometimes feared, yet always present in whispered warnings. Among the Evenki shore peoples, the being is spoken of as a guardian of the forest, a silent observer that enforces balance between humans and nature. The tales describe towering, fur-covered figures, cautious and elusive, that retreat when confronted, yet leave signs of their presence everywhere. Broken branches, disturbed snow, and subtle movements that seem almost intentional. Anthropologists studying oral traditions have noted the consistency across generations, suggesting that these stories are less myth and more memory of repeated encounters with something real. Eyewitnesses recount fleeting glimpses of something large and upright, its motion fluid and purposeful, disappearing between trees as if aware of being watched. Hikers and hunters alike report sudden movements at the edge of their vision, shapes that vanish when approached, leaving an eerie silence in their wake. The creature is said to move with surprising speed, yet carefully, avoiding noisy contact with the environment, a behaviour inconsistent with known predators. Some accounts describe it pausing to observe before slipping back into the shadows, almost calculating its actions. These moments are brief but vivid, leaving observers with a mixture of awe and fear, often unable to articulate what they have seen. Those who venture deeper into the mountains often report an uncanny sensation of being followed, of eyes tracking them through unseen corridors of trees and undergrowth. Campers sometimes awaken to the sound of distant snapping branches or feel a pressure of presence nearby, though nothing is visible. The sensation is described as intelligent, not random, with subtle cues that suggest awareness of human movement. Even trained trackers have reported feeling a gaze without seeing a source, as if something large is monitoring them. This psychological imprint, fear mixed with fascination, becomes a thread linking multiple reports over time, hinting at a consistent unseen presence that defies easy explanation. Scientific teams have attempted to document the creature with cameras and thermal sensors, recording brief anomalies that vanish before verification is possible. Motion-triggered devices have captured fleeting images, indistinct shadows, bursts of heat, or sudden changes in infrared readings. None of these has produced conclusive proof, but patterns emerge, suggesting movement inconsistent with wind, falling debris, or conventional wildlife. Teams report the frustration of arriving at a camera site only to find prints that lead into areas no one can follow safely. Even with rigorous methodology, the elusive being seems to anticipate or avoid observation, leaving only tantalizing hints for investigators to piece together. Tracks left behind in the snow remain some of the most perplexing evidence, showing stride lengths and foot proportions inconsistent with any known regional animal. Occasionally the impressions exhibit claw marks, while others appear clean, as if the creature adapts its movements depending on conditions. Some footprints suggest an uneven gait, or the use of hands for stability across rugged terrain, implying strength and coordination beyond known species. When cast in plaster or photographed, they retain anomalies, depth inconsistent with weight, unusual spacing, and occasional overlapping impressions that suggest multiple entities or unknown behaviours. Each discovery fuels both speculation and deepening mystery. Strange noises, low rumbles, cracking branches, and sudden bursts of movement have been reported repeatedly, echoing through valleys where no human or known animal could have passed. These sounds are often heard at twilight or in dense fog, amplifying their eerie effect. Witnesses describe guttural calls, thumps, or rustling that seems purposeful, coordinated, or even communicative. Audio recordings are occasionally made, but analysis fails to identify any recognizable source. The timing, frequency, and intensity of these noises often correspond with visual sightings, creating a multi-sensory pattern that reinforces the notion of an intelligent, hidden presence in the wilderness. Skeptics suggest misidentified bears or wind-disturbed trees, but the consistency and repeated patterns across decades defy simple, natural explanations. While some tracks and sounds may be attributed to large mammals, The combination of behaviour, timing and physical evidence suggests a different cause entirely. Researchers note that reports occur across seasons, weather conditions and regions within the Kuznetsk-Alatau, pointing toward a persistent entity rather than sporadic anomalies. Photographs, sketches and first-hand accounts collectively resist simple dismissal. Each skeptical attempt to rationalise the phenomena only highlights inconsistencies, reinforcing the sense that something truly unexplained occupies these forests. Recent sightings describe silhouettes moving along ridgelines at dusk, disappearing instantly into thickets, leaving observers questioning the limits of what they believe is possible. These moments are brief yet striking, with witnesses often noting a sense of recognition or intelligence in the creature's movements. Some report that the figure pauses, observing before retreating, suggesting awareness and strategic thinking. The environment itself seems to accommodate its elusiveness. Steep slopes, dense vegetation and shadowed valleys allow the entity to vanish quickly, leaving human perception just short of confirmation. Even seasoned mountaineers admit to the disorienting effect of encountering something so large and yet so unseen. Stories of the creature have influenced local behaviour for generations, from altered hunting routes to nighttime precautions, weaving fear and fascination into everyday life. Communities report leaving certain areas untouched, respecting zones of perceived presence. Children are warned against wandering too far, and some paths are avoided entirely. Anthropological studies highlight how folklore, observation and practical caution have merged into a cultural response to a being that remains unverified yet palpably real in its effect on daily life. Over time, these adaptations underscore the presence's subtle authority, blending mystery with pragmatic survival in the harsh Siberian terrain. Each new report, whether from a hunter, hiker or researcher, reinforces the sense that the Kuznetsk-Alatau hides something beyond ordinary understanding, resisting capture or explanation. The variety and consistency of evidence, footprints, fleeting visuals, noises and local knowledge suggest a phenomenon that interacts with humans while remaining fundamentally inaccessible. Attempts at scientific documentation continue, but the creature's elusiveness challenges conventional study, forcing investigators to confront the limits of observation. This ongoing enigma maintains tension between belief and skepticism, drawing those who seek answers into forests that have been silent witnesses for generations. The shadowed expanse of the Kuznetsk-Alatau holds a presence that slips through every lens and trace, leaving only questions that linger long after the snow has fallen. The mystery of Lake Baikal's underwater lights. The early evening sun casts long silver reflections across the rippling surface of Lake Baikal, making the vast water seem almost otherworldly, untouched by time or human presence. Locals have long whispered of strange lights appearing beneath the waves, fleeting and enigmatic, a phenomenon that has confounded scientists, fishermen and travellers alike for decades. These illuminations often appear as small pinpricks or pulsating glows that rise and vanish in moments, leaving those who witness them questioning whether they have seen natural phenomena, human error, or something far stranger, something that seems aware of being observed. Indigenous stories from the Evenki and Buryat peoples speak of glowing spirits inhabiting the lake's depths, sometimes guiding travellers, sometimes heralding danger, echoing in modern reports of unexplained lights. Shamans long ago warned of the lake's moods, describing mysterious luminescence as omens or messages from unseen beings. These oral histories, passed across generations, intersect eerily with contemporary sightings, giving the phenomenon a haunting continuity. Researchers attempting to disentangle myth from reality must contend with centuries of tradition that both obscure and enrich the mystery, making Lake Baikal's luminous secrets a bridge between culture, history, and the inexplicable. Local fishermen describe nights when their nets are illuminated by pulses of light, moving with apparent purpose and vanishing when approached, leaving behind only ripples and unease. Accounts vary, some noting brilliant streaks ascending from the depths, others seeing entire areas of the lake glow momentarily as if lit from below. These encounters are never consistent in pattern or timing, which frustrates both casual observers and professionals attempting methodical study. The unpredictability of these manifestations amplifies their eerie quality, creating a sense that the lake itself might be alive, capable of reacting to human presence or environmental changes in ways science cannot yet measure. Modern sonar scans and submersible explorations have recorded anomalies that resist categorization, shapes flickering just beyond the reach of lenses and sensors. Teams sent to map the lake's intricate topography often report readings that briefly suggest movement or structure where none should exist. In several instances, lights appear on video for mere seconds, only to vanish before anyone can capture their origin. These fleeting events challenge conventional technology, forcing investigators to confront the possibility that whatever produces them may operate outside the parameters of known physics or biology, a presence that is both tangible and maddeningly elusive. Observers note the lights cluster in irregular formations and occasionally dart against prevailing currents, suggesting movements that seem deliberate rather than random. Patterns repeat in some areas but appear absent in others, confounding attempts to establish behavioral models. Small teams of scientists and divers have spent entire nights attempting to predict the light's occurrences, only to find that each incident defies prior observations. Some hypothesize that unknown aquatic creatures might be responsible, yet even the most exotic species in Lake Baikal fail to account for the brightness, speed, and sporadic appearances. Every observation leaves more questions than answers, heightening the aura of mystery. The lake itself, with its profound depth and thermal layers, could conceal natural phenomena, yet these conditions fail to explain the erratic timing and intensity of the illuminations. Temperature differentials and methane pockets may cause occasional luminescence, but the scale and regularity of these reported lights surpass any geological or chemical explanation known to science. Researchers examining environmental data find no correlation with lunar cycles, weather patterns, or seismic activity that might account for the consistent appearances of these underwater glows. The lake's own geography, deep and labyrinthine, only serves to amplify the sense of concealed secrets beneath the surface. Submersible footage has occasionally captured brief distortions in the water column, fleeting shapes that vanish the moment investigators attempt closer inspection. Some describe blurred forms that resemble organic structures, while others note angular, geometric anomalies inconsistent with natural rock formations. Every glimpse ends abruptly, leaving images incomplete and open to interpretation. Analysts struggle with whether these fleeting figures are optical illusions, reflections of equipment interference, or genuine phenomena. Regardless of origin, the fleeting nature of these observations deepens the sense that Lake Baikal harbours mysteries that will not yield to ordinary methods of exploration or understanding. Scientific skeptics propose methane eruptions, optical refractions, or bioluminescent creatures, but the patterns and scale of the events remain inconsistent with known explanations. Even controlled experiments with artificial light and sonar disturbances have failed to replicate the conditions observed by locals. The skepticism is necessary for scientific rigour, yet it clashes with decades of eyewitness accounts and historical reports. The tension between empirical data and personal observation creates a unique kind of uncertainty, a space where doubt and belief coexist, shaping both the investigation and the mythos surrounding the lake. The presence of these lights has shaped local life. Superstitions influence navigation routes. Nighttime activity is minimized, and stories of caution are passed to new generations. Fishing communities often avoid certain areas after dark, respecting invisible boundaries that seem defined by the mysterious illuminations. Some travelers speak of feeling watched or sensing movement in the water when the lights appear, a psychological imprint that lingers long after they leave the lake. This cultural adaptation demonstrates the profound impact of the phenomenon, showing that its influence extends beyond observation into everyday decision-making and survival practices. Several divers report rhythmic pulses or sequential flashes that almost suggest intention, as if the lake itself were communicating in a language beyond human understanding. These signals do not follow patterns known to science, and no artificial or natural source can be consistently linked to them. Many experienced divers recount moments when multiple lights move in coordinated sequences, disappearing simultaneously when approached. Such accounts spark debate over whether Lake Baikal might conceal unknown intelligent behaviour or simply an unrecognised natural process, an unresolved question that keeps both local inhabitants and visiting researchers awake at night. Despite numerous studies, high-tech equipment and repeated expeditions, the luminous phenomena remain elusive, continuing to confound both scientists and locals alike. Equipment often fails at the precise moment the lights are most active, or the anomalies appear just beyond sensor range. These frustratingly brief glimpses reinforce the sense that whatever causes the lights is aware of human observation and actively avoids it. Reports from independent researchers sometimes contradict official findings, further complicating attempts to establish a definitive explanation. Each encounter strengthens the idea that Lake Baikal harbours forces or phenomena entirely beyond current understanding. The depths of Lake Baikal guard their secrets tightly, with darkness and cold concealing whatever lies beneath, offering only glimpses that tease comprehension without ever yielding it. Even the most sophisticated submersibles and sonar technologies can only capture fragments of the lights, and no sampling attempts have produced conclusive results. With every expedition that fails to resolve the mystery, intrigue and speculation grow, and the lake continues to inspire awe, fear, and scholarly debate. Its depths remain an arena where natural laws and unexplained occurrences intersect in unsettling ways, inviting both caution and curiosity. Each new observation reinforces the impression that Lake Baikal's underwater lights are more than an environmental anomaly. They are a phenomenon that challenges the limits of perception, science, and belief. Patterns emerge, only to dissolve upon closer inspection, and narratives of folklore intersect with modern technology in ways that defy explanation. From fleeting sparks beneath nets to sonar anomalies and pulsing glows, every account deepens the sense of an intelligence, or force, concealed beneath the surface, unseen yet undeniably present, waiting for understanding that may never come. Below the reflective expanse of Lake Baikal, luminous pulses dance and vanish as though the waters themselves guard a secret that refuses to be revealed. The abandoned Gulag settlements. In the frozen expanses of Siberia, entire prison towns once pulsing with the grim routine of forced labour now sit deserted, their skeletal structures silently testifying to decades of suffering and abandonment. These Gulag settlements, scattered across vast tundra and taiga, were home to tens of thousands of prisoners during the Soviet era. Yet today their barracks and administrative buildings remain eerily intact, with peeling paint, shattered windows and rusting machinery, suggesting a sudden, almost unnatural cessation of life. Explorers venturing inside often report an oppressive quiet, broken only by the creak of warped wood or the distant howl of wind through empty corridors. Concrete foundations jut from the snow like forgotten monuments, and narrow alleys between the buildings twist unpredictably, leaving visitors disoriented, as if the settlements themselves were designed to confuse. Some former mining camps and logging outposts were converted into penal complexes during Stalin's rule, and their layouts retain a chilling resemblance to modern prisons, with high fences, guard towers, and internal checkpoints meticulously planned to control movement. Photographs taken in these settlements show personal belongings left behind. Rusted pots in kitchens, threadbare blankets on bunk beds, and letters yellowed with age, offering glimpses into lives abruptly abandoned. The geography of Siberia exacerbated the isolation of these gulags, placing them on frozen riverbanks near icebound lakes or deep within the dense taiga, where access required arduous treks by foot or sled. Many camps were deliberately located near mining or logging operations, exploiting prisoners' labour under the harshest conditions imaginable. Survival was uncertain, with reports from archives indicating mortality rates reaching as high as 20% in some camps due to disease, malnutrition, and extreme exposure to the elements. The settlements now remain as silent reminders of these struggles, their empty streets evoking a sense of lives suspended mid-motion. Walking through the remnants of administrative buildings, one can find registers, ledgers, and faded official documents detailing prisoner work quotas, transfers, and disciplinary actions. These records, preserved by the cold and the neglect, provide glimpses into the bureaucratic machinery that underpinned the camps, but they also leave gaps that fuel the unsettling sense that something is missing. Items scattered across floors, shoes, hats, and broken furniture appear frozen in time, as if the inhabitants vanished in a single instant, leaving behind an aura of unfinished existence that defies rational explanation. Some explorers have reported glimpses of movement or inexplicable sounds within the abandoned buildings, though these claims remain unverified. Footsteps echo where none should exist. Doors seem to shift slightly without wind, and shadows appear in corners of the eye. Anthropologists and historians suggest these could be tricks of the imagination, intensified by isolation and the oppressive atmosphere, yet local legends tell of restless spirits of prisoners who never left, wandering the ruins at night carrying the weight of injustice and suffering that the living cannot perceive. The climate plays a role in the settlement's unsettling presence. Harsh Siberian winters preserve the ruins in near-perfect condition, with snow and frost coating wooden beams and metal structures, creating a ghostly monochrome landscape that seems almost theatrical in its stillness. Summer brings a different eeriness, as the melting snow and overgrown vegetation reveal sunken cellars, collapsed roofs and rusted vehicles, the detritus of a society abandoned yet carefully preserved by nature. Streams that once provided water to the camps now flow silently through empty courtyards, their gentle murmur contrasting sharply with the unsettling quiet of human absence. In some towns, even the infrastructure left behind hints at rapid evacuation. Electrical lines dangle from poles, plumbing remains in situ, and heavy machinery is found mid-operation, as though workers simply stepped away. Soviet archival research indicates that several camps were closed hastily during administrative reorganizations in the 1950s and 1960s, yet the abruptness with which belongings were abandoned has puzzled historians, since many logistical plans required significant preparation. This dissonance between the methodical nature of the state and the chaotic state of the settlements adds another layer of unease to the sites. Archaeological studies have confirmed that some of the settlements were used continuously for decades, resulting in layers of habitation that preserve multiple eras within the same footprint. Excavations reveal artifacts ranging from handmade toys to tools used in timber and mining operations, but in many instances the evidence of daily life is eerily sparse in comparison to the size and complexity of the infrastructure. Corridors and dormitories that once held hundreds now feel cavernous and disproportionate, reinforcing the impression that these buildings exist for some purpose beyond simple human occupancy. Reports from contemporary visitors occasionally describe anomalous phenomena, such as temperatures dropping sharply inside certain buildings or electronic devices malfunctioning without explanation. Satellite imagery reveals patterns of decay and structural collapse that do not align with natural processes alone, leading some researchers to question whether environmental factors like permafrost movement, combined with centuries of neglect, may be influencing perceptions of these spaces. Even so, the settlement's aura of menace and abandonment cannot be fully explained by science, leaving room for speculation that lingers uneasily in the mind. Local communities often recount stories of shadows moving along the periphery of the ruins, figures glimpsed at dawn or dusk who vanish upon approach. Elderly residents describe hearing distant hammering or the low murmur of voices in the winter, when winds should carry no sound. While historians dismiss some of these claims as folklore or misattribution, the consistency of reports across settlements separated by hundreds of kilometres invites a more careful consideration of what might persist in the remnants of such suffering. The very architecture of the settlements adds to their mystique. Long corridors, barred windows, and high ceilings give the interiors a cathedral-like quality, turning ordinary rooms into vast spaces filled with echoes. Staircases collapse into shadows, while narrow passages twist unpredictably, creating a labyrinthine effect. Explorers and researchers alike describe a sense of being watched, a subtle disquiet that is difficult to rationalize but impossible to ignore, as though the buildings themselves remember the presence of those who once inhabited them. Even maps of these regions betray a strange absence. Many Gulag settlements are omitted from official cartography or appear only as faded annotations, leaving their exact locations uncertain to all but the most determined explorers. This deliberate erasure, combined with the physical abandonment, has given rise to a unique phenomenon: sites that are at once historical, geographical, and psychological enigmas, their mystery deepened by the intersection of fact, memory, and imagination. Nowadays, these abandoned Gulag settlements are more than relics. They are haunting witnesses to a violent history and enduring symbols of human endurance and suffering. Each broken window, every rusted piece of machinery, and the frozen streets whisper stories that remain untold. While some researchers catalogue the ruins scientifically, others experience a profound unease that defies explanation, as if the settlements themselves retain the memory of their former inhabitants. And when the sun dips below the horizon and the cold wind rises, the silence of the gulags feels less like emptiness and more like a patient waiting that has endured far longer than anyone could imagine. The Shaitan Lake disappearances. A chill wind sweeps across the isolated waters, carrying an unsettling stillness that has long unnerved fishermen in the region. Shaitan Lake, tucked deep within Siberia's taiga, is an unassuming body of water at first glance, yet its surface holds a disquieting reputation. For decades, those who ventured to its shores report sudden, inexplicable vanishings, and traces of abandoned boats or personal gear serve as haunting reminders of the lake's enigmatic nature. Despite careful navigation and preparation, fishermen occasionally disappear without warning, leaving behind unanswered questions and an ever-growing sense of unease that seems to settle over the surrounding forest. Towering pine forests frame the horizon, their shadows stretching toward the surface in shapes that seem to shift with each passing hour. The topography itself adds to the sense of isolation, with steep slopes descending abruptly into the water and rocky promontories that break the wind into unpredictable patterns. Seasonal snowmelt feeds the lake with icy tributaries, while submerged springs create sudden currents that challenge even experienced travellers. These environmental details, though documented by hydrologists and cartographers, fail to account for the more disturbing aspects of the lake, where disappearances occur under conditions that appear otherwise safe and mundane. Archival reports hint at a pattern of unexplained vanishings, their dates and victims recorded sparingly, leaving more questions than answers. Soviet-era records mention isolated cases of fishermen and hunters who failed to return from routine trips, but the details are often incomplete or contradictory. Local archives and official reports note only the barest administrative facts: a missing person filed, a search conducted, no body recovered. Researchers piecing together these fragments struggle to form a coherent narrative, and the scarcity of reliable documentation fuels speculation that something beyond ordinary misfortune has always lingered over these waters. Echoes of sudden disturbances reach those who dwell nearby, describing waves rising without cause and sounds that defy explanation. Witnesses describe low, rolling vibrations across the water, often accompanied by splashes that suggest movement just beneath the surface. Some report hearing faint voices or whispers, while others notice objects floating or submerging inexplicably. These phenomena are intermittent and fleeting, eluding even careful observation. Yet their consistency in multiple independent accounts lends weight to the unsettling notion that the lake behaves unpredictably, almost with intent, toward those who enter its domain. Strange currents ripple through concealed channels, their irregular movements confounding scientists and leaving the lake's behavior largely unresolved. Hydrographic studies have mapped portions of the lake, revealing unexpected underwater depressions and pockets of unusually warm water near the shoreline. Methane emissions from decaying organic material beneath the sediment may account for some turbulence, yet they fail to explain sudden whirlpools or the seemingly deliberate patterns described by visitors. Researchers remain divided. Some suggest natural explanations, while others leave room for the lake's mysteries to remain unsolved, acknowledging the limitations of modern observation in such a remote location. Empty boats are discovered drifting aimlessly near the shoreline, some tipped at odd angles, their contents left in the midst of daily routines. Fishing nets lie half submerged, personal equipment is scattered along the banks, and cooking supplies are sometimes found abandoned on the docks. These objects convey the impression of sudden departures, as if the occupants simply vanished into the water without struggle. Documentation from local authorities confirms that rescue efforts often find no trace of the missing, reinforcing the unnerving reality that Shaitan Lake has claimed victims under circumstances that defy simple explanation. Hydrologists who have studied the area note erratic currents and temperature shifts, but the data fail to explain the lake's more inexplicable events. Seasonal changes produce predictable stratification in the water, yet researchers have recorded sudden alterations in flow patterns that appear unrelated to weather or natural inflow. Measurements of conductivity, dissolved oxygen, and temperature fluctuations hint at subterranean influences, yet surveys reveal no obvious geological causes for the lake's strange activity. Each inconclusive study adds a layer of uncertainty, reinforcing the notion that the lake resists full understanding. The air carries a heavy metallic tang, and even the cries of birds seem altered, muted, or delayed as if swallowed by the environment. the surrounding forest responds to the lake in subtle ways. Trees lean toward the water, reeds sway without wind, and wildlife appears unusually wary or absent. Researchers and local guides note that animals avoid certain areas near the lake's edges, a behaviour whose cause remains speculative but consistent. The combination of sensory oddities and disappearing humans intensifies the atmosphere, leaving those present with a profound sense that the landscape itself is unusually sentient. Patterns emerge from careful observation, isolated spots, specific wind behaviours, and sudden surges in the water coinciding with disappearances. Detailed records indicate that vanishings often occur near submerged sandbars or narrow channels where currents unexpectedly strengthen. Some researchers hypothesize that these areas amplify underwater turbulence, while others point to meteorological or geological anomalies. The lack of a definitive explanation fosters a persistent tension for anyone venturing near these spots, creating a narrative that merges environmental hazard with the unnerving sense of purposeful concealment. Stories passed through generations speak of a restless mirror, a body of water that exacts a silent toll, its narratives curiously matching documented events. Oral histories describe travellers being drawn to the lake's centre by forces unseen, while hunters report equipment disappearing or boats shifting without cause. Though folkloric in nature, these accounts parallel modern investigations and reinforce the lake's reputation as a place where normal expectations fail. The coexistence of legend and documented incidents blurs the line between fact and perception, deepening the mystery in ways that purely scientific observation cannot fully capture. Search teams report scattered belongings and abandoned gear, but those who vanished leave no trace behind, deepening the mystery. Despite comprehensive surveys and coordinated rescue operations, bodies are rarely recovered and few physical clues remain. Investigators document items in situ as they were left, creating eerie tableaus of interrupted routines. The persistence of such scenes over decades lends an otherworldly quality to the lake's narrative, one in which human presence is ephemeral and the environment immutable, yet capable of disturbing interventions. Sunlight glints off the surface in ways that hint at movement below, revealing glimpses of currents no one can fully explain. Ripples form in concentric circles without discernible cause, and small eddies appear where the lake should remain calm. Observers note the uncanny precision with which these disturbances seem to guide objects or influence the water's motion. Even on the clearest days, the lake retains an inscrutable character, one that seems to observe and respond to human activity, maintaining a veil of uncertainty that challenges perception and reason alike. Despite repeated investigation and scrutiny, the lake holds its secrets firmly beneath the surface, a dark expanse indifferent to human inquiry. Those who return from its shores often describe a lasting unease, an awareness that something remains unresolved, hidden in plain view. Photographs, measurements, and personal accounts accumulate, yet none fully penetrate the mystery. Shaitan Lake persists as both a physical location and a psychological enigma, a place where nature and the unknown converge in ways that defy expectation or control. Nightfall descends, and the lake holds a quiet awareness, as if waiting for the next visitor to be claimed. The Krasnoyarsk Time Distortion reports. Travellers navigating the endless Siberian roads noticed their watches faltering, as if each tick hesitated before continuing. On stretches of highway that cut through the remote taiga, time seems to stretch and compress in ways that defy normal perception. Clocks stop, instruments fail, and even the most seasoned drivers report a creeping unease, a sense that minutes can vanish or expand without warning. Sparse signage and long distances between settlements compound the effect, leaving those who traverse the region acutely aware of isolation, as though the land itself conspires to remove any reliable markers of temporal certainty. The vast taiga stretches unbroken on either side, dense with conifers whose shadows play tricks on the eye and the mind. Snow-laden pines rise like sentinels along roads that wind through valleys and over low ridges, their uniformity creating a disorienting rhythm for anyone attempting to gauge speed or distance. Seasonal fog can settle unexpectedly, muting sound and light, while sudden gusts of wind whip across open plains, adding to the subtle instability travellers perceive. The geography is real, the environment harsh and exacting, Yet these natural factors cannot fully explain the persistent reports of temporal anomalies documented by authorities and researchers alike. Journal entries and official reports describe sudden lapses, where hours seem to vanish and routine trips take inexplicably longer or shorter than expected. Transport logs from long-haul drivers, supplemented by communications with regional dispatch centres, indicate discrepancies between expected and actual travel times that cannot be accounted for by weather, terrain, or traffic. Personal diaries recount moments where devices display impossible sequences. A clock might advance minutes in an instant or stall entirely while everything else appears normal. These accounts, corroborated by multiple independent sources, paint a picture of an area where the usual laws of measured time appear, at least temporarily, suspended. Sunlight filtering through the canopy shifts unpredictably, casting elongated shadows that seem to contradict the hour indicated by instruments. Observers describe moments when the forest appears to slow or accelerate subtly, creating an unsettling mismatch between visual cues and timekeeping devices. The latitude of the Krasnoyarsk region produces dramatic changes in daylight hours across seasons, yet even these extremes cannot account for sudden inconsistencies reported along the taiga highways. Investigators note that the interplay of light, shadow and terrain may contribute to perceptual disorientation, amplifying a sense that the natural passage of time is unreliable in specific zones. GPS devices and radio equipment often fail without warning, their screens flickering or freezing entirely, leaving travelers isolated in both space and time. Navigation systems that normally provide precise positioning occasionally display impossible coordinates, while satellite communication is sporadically interrupted without a clear cause. Emergency radios sometimes broadcast static or delayed messages, creating confusion in an area where human support is already limited. Technical anomalies, though documented by engineers, remain unexplained, suggesting a subtle interaction between environmental conditions and the instruments used to measure movement, amplifying the unnerving feeling of temporal instability for those who rely upon them. Those who journey along these remote routes recount a growing vertigo, an internal rhythm that feels detached from the measured passage of minutes, leaving them unsure of how long they have been on the road. Drivers report sudden fatigue or heightened alertness, sensations of motion inconsistent with actual speed, and disorientation that persists even after leaving the anomalous stretches. This psychological dimension compounds the tangible effects of equipment failure, creating a layered experience in which both perception and measurement appear unreliable. Long-term observations indicate that repeated exposure may intensify the sensation, making the environment seem to stretch or compress subjective experience. Certain stretches of the highway repeatedly provoke these anomalies, particularly areas near swamps, river bends, or undulating hills where environmental factors interact in unusual ways. Topographical features such as small depressions or changes in elevation may alter wind patterns, temperature, or magnetic readings, which some scientists believe could influence instruments and human perception. Despite these hypotheses, no singular cause has been isolated, and the anomalies continue to defy explanation. The recurring locations, however, suggest that the phenomenon is tied to the landscape in some way, whether through environmental interference, geological peculiarities, or factors yet to be fully understood. Scientists who have investigated the region note irregular electromagnetic readings, yet no consistent pattern has been identified to fully explain the disturbances. Measurements of geomagnetic activity, atmospheric ionization, and other physical variables show minor fluctuations that could influence electronic devices, but none account for the intensity or timing of reported temporal distortions. Researchers acknowledge the limitations of monitoring in such remote and vast expanses, and while hypotheses exist, they remain inconclusive. The combination of instrumentation anomalies, human perception shifts, and environmental variables creates an enduring puzzle for those who study the region. Multiple observers report conflicting perceptions. One might sense a few seconds lost, while another experiences minutes unaccounted for, despite travelling side by side. Accounts describe moments where travellers glance at a clock or GPS unit only to find readings that contradict their sense of elapsed time, creating confusion and anxiety. The inconsistencies extend to group experiences, where consensus on duration becomes impossible, reinforcing the impression that the anomaly affects perception as well as measurement. These reports, recorded over decades, suggest a persistent and reproducible pattern that continues to perplex investigators. Clocks can resume normal function abruptly, while human perception lags, creating a dissonance that unsettles even the most experienced travellers. The resumption of regular timekeeping offers no reassurance, as subjective awareness may remain temporarily skewed, leaving individuals unsure of how much time truly passed. This disjunction between objective and perceived time intensifies the sensation that reality itself is unstable along these stretches of the taiga. Long-haul transporters and researchers alike describe a lingering unease that follows them beyond the area, as if the experience cannot be fully reconciled with normal expectations of time. Residents warn newcomers of zones where time hesitates, emphasizing caution without explaining. Their testimonies are corroborated by recorded anomalies. Conversations with those who have lived in the region for generations reveal a shared understanding that certain routes are peculiar, that watches may fail and perception may deceive. While framed as advice rather than folklore, these accounts align with documented anomalies and reinforce the region's reputation as a place where the passage of hours cannot be taken for granted. The warnings themselves carry weight precisely because the phenomenon has persisted without resolution for decades. Even after leaving the area, travellers describe lingering effects, a subtle disorientation or a feeling that time elsewhere has been altered by the encounter. Some note that subsequent hours feel elongated or truncated, and clocks outside the anomalous region may seem slightly off. These residual impressions suggest that the phenomenon leaves an imprint on human perception, blurring the line between the measurable and the experienced. The cumulative effect of repeated exposure and anecdotal consistency adds to the unsettling reality that certain stretches of the Krasnoyarsk taiga continue to defy conventional understanding. And in the silent stretches of the Krasnoyarsk taiga, it feels as though the forest itself holds the hours hostage, leaving those who pass within its bounds suspended between yesterday and tomorrow. The Siberian sinkholes of Yamal. A sudden collapse in the tundra revealed a yawning crater, its edges jagged and smoking with rising gas. Remote expeditions first encountered these formations during aerial surveys of the Yamal Peninsula, their sheer scale leaving scientists and observers stunned. The largest craters reach hundreds of meters in diameter and descend tens of meters, a sudden rupture in an otherwise flat, desolate expanse. Even from a distance, the hollows radiate an unsettling presence, as though the land itself has expelled something long trapped beneath the frozen surface. Each new formation arrives without warning, leaving speculation to fill the voids between discovery and explanation. The Yamal Peninsula stretches endlessly, a sparsely vegetated Arctic expanse where permafrost blankets the ground for meters below. Lichens, mosses and stunted shrubs struggle across the frozen soil, their resilience a quiet counterpoint to the violent shifts beneath. Seasonal variations bring sudden thaws and refreezes, creating a brittle crust that can conceal the slow movement of underlying ice and gas pockets. Winds sweep across the tundra with little obstruction, carrying an eerie silence that amplifies any rumble or fracture. In this frozen wilderness, human presence is minimal, and the sudden emergence of massive sinkholes transforms the landscape into something both alien and threatening. Deep rumbles echoed across the tundra, signalling the ground's violent shift before the formation of new voids. Witnesses describe a low, resonant vibration that precedes the collapse, a sound that rolls across the plains and lingers in the chest. Animals reportedly flee these areas, their instincts detecting changes invisible to human eyes. In several instances, locals noticed the ground bulging slightly before giving way, a subtle deformation that hints at the immense pressure accumulating beneath. The suddenness of the collapse magnifies the mystery, leaving only the crater and displaced earth as evidence of the forces at work. Scientific teams have documented the sinkholes, noting that thawing permafrost and trapped methane may play a role, though no single cause explains every formation. Soil cores and gas samples reveal high concentrations of methane, long sealed beneath layers of ice. Permafrost degradation, accelerated by rising temperatures in the Arctic, contributes to instability, yet not every crater aligns with obvious environmental triggers. Field reports note occasional scorch marks or burned soil at the base of certain holes, suggesting minor explosions accompanying sudden ground collapse. Despite extensive analysis, the phenomenon resists simple explanation, reminding observers that the Arctic remains a realm of unpredictable extremes. Surrounding vegetation is often disrupted violently, with scattered soil and uprooted shrubs marking the sudden appearance of the craters. Ice fragments sometimes litter the edges, evidence of subterranean pressure pushing upward before release. Shallow pools may form in the depressions, reflecting the overcast sky like a cold, placid mirror. In contrast to the devastation, the rest of the tundra appears untouched, emphasizing the localized and capricious nature of the event. Every new crater presents a unique configuration, a reminder that even in a frozen, uniform landscape, unpredictable forces can shape sudden, chaotic forms. Over time, similar sinkholes emerged across the region, hinting at an unseen force shaping the Arctic terrain. Satellite imagery shows clusters forming near known natural gas fields, though correlation does not equate to causation. Researchers track these formations over multiple seasons, noting that some enlarge gradually while others appear almost instantaneously. The frequency of their appearance raises concerns about broader permafrost destabilization, yet the precise mechanics remain elusive. Each crater is a testament to the tension between permanence and impermanence, where centuries of frozen soil can yield suddenly to subterranean forces. Steam and gas hiss from some craters, carrying a pungent, acrid scent that mixes with the crisp Arctic air. Observers report visible plumes rising above the edges, curling upward in cold drafts. Occasionally, snow and ice near the rim melt rapidly, forming temporary trickles into the depression. The combination of visual, auditory and olfactory cues creates a stark impression that the Earth itself is alive, releasing pressures long confined beneath. Even distant craters convey this unnerving vitality, as if the tundra remembers the forces beneath and occasionally asserts them with sudden, unmistakable authority. Harsh weather and remote terrain make studying these formations a dangerous and unpredictable endeavour. Expedition teams must contend with temperatures far below freezing, unpredictable storms, and treacherous ice layers concealing deep fissures. Equipment is vulnerable to extreme cold, and travel between craters requires careful navigation across fragile tundra. These logistical challenges limit sustained observation, leaving researchers to rely on satellite imagery, periodic field visits, and accounts from those living nearby. The inhospitable conditions amplify the sense of mystery, as the Arctic conceals much even as it reveals sudden evidence of subterranean upheaval. The release of methane from these sinkholes hints at larger climatic implications, as pockets of gas trapped for millennia escape into the atmosphere. Methane is a potent greenhouse gas, and sudden releases could contribute to feedback loops accelerating regional warming. Scientists monitor gas concentrations and temperatures around new craters to assess environmental impact, though precise predictions are difficult given the unpredictable nature of formations. Each venting event demonstrates the precarious balance within the permafrost, a reminder that the Arctic landscape is both fragile and explosively dynamic. Travellers passing through notice the sheer scale, with craters appearing abruptly, deep enough to swallow small vehicles or large debris entirely. Helicopter surveys capture wide expanses of scarred tundra, where circular depressions punctuate otherwise level terrain. Hikers and survey teams report a visceral unease approaching these sites, as if the earth beneath their feet has become unknowable. The combination of sudden physical absence and surrounding untouched land creates a surreal contrast, reinforcing the impression that the tundra is both ancient and violently active beneath its calm surface. Residents speak cautiously of the ground itself as unpredictable, a landscape capable of sudden, inexplicable upheaval. Hunters and herders describe avoiding certain zones entirely, noting that the tundra may shift without warning. Even those accustomed to Arctic extremes treat the craters with awe, acknowledging forces beyond human control. Such testimony aligns with scientific observation, yet adds a human perspective that emphasizes the psychological weight of witnessing these dramatic transformations in a remote wilderness. Months after their appearance, the voids retain their mystery, their full depths hidden beneath layers of frozen earth and lingering steam. Attempts to map or probe the deepest recesses are met with technical and environmental limitations. The craters serve as a stark reminder of the Arctic's latent volatility, where centuries of frozen stability can yield to sudden collapse. Each new formation compounds questions about the future of permafrost, the potential for further subterranean eruptions, and the broader consequences for an ecosystem on the edge of climatic change. The tundra of Yamal sometimes fractures without warning, revealing vast emptiness and leaving questions that stretch far deeper than the earth itself. The silent town of Kadichan. Streets once thrumming with miners and families now lie empty, frost glinting off abandoned cars and cracked asphalt. Kadichan, located in eastern Siberia, stands as a monument to sudden human absence, its concrete buildings and quiet avenues frozen in a moment of departure. The town's layout reflects the rhythms of industrial life, with communal housing, schools and small shops aligned to accommodate the daily routines of miners and their families. Yet now, the silence dominates, punctuated only by the occasional crack of ice or gust of frigid wind. This stark emptiness leaves an unsettling impression, as if the town itself remembers its inhabitants even in their absence. Kadichan was built during the Soviet era to support extensive coal mining, its rise fueled by the economic and political demands of the time. At its peak, it hosted thousands of residents working the surrounding coalfields, drawing families into a carefully structured industrial enclave. Factories, administrative offices and residential blocks sprang up rapidly, a testament to the efficiency and ambition of Soviet planning. Despite its remote location, Kadichan flourished with a sense of purpose, its community tightly bound by shared labour, seasonal routines and the harsh conditions of Siberian winters. Yet beneath this apparent vitality, the seeds of sudden decline were quietly taking hold. The town's routines, from factory shifts to school bells, once structured the lives of thousands, now vanished without a trace. Each morning, workers would descend to the coal pits, children would gather at schools, and shopkeepers would open their doors to the hum of human activity. Today, the only reminders of these rhythms are empty corridors, frozen stairwells, and the faint echo of wind through hollow buildings. The contrast between past vibrancy and present stillness is jarring, and every step through the streets feels like entering a town suspended mid-thought, where time itself has paused in silent witness to abandonment. In houses and workplaces, belongings remain undisturbed, chairs pushed back, clothing draped over furniture, toys left where children last played. Kitchens still hold unwashed dishes, notebooks remain open on desks, and personal effects collect dust atop dressers and counters. These details create an uncanny impression that the inhabitants might return at any moment, their absence more pronounced for the traces of their interrupted lives. The suddenness of the evacuation, coupled with the preservation of these items, evokes both melancholy and unease, suggesting a town caught between two worlds, one inhabited, one forsaken. Wind whistles through broken windows carrying the scent of cold metal and damp wood across silent corridors and vacant homes. Doors hang ajar, their hinges groaning in the icy gusts, and stairwells echo faintly with each step. The streets are littered with debris, while the skeletal remains of playgrounds and fences shimmer under layers of frost. These sensory details underscore the surreal quality of Kadichan, transforming what might otherwise be a mundane abandoned town into a haunting tableau where every sound and scent reminds visitors of life abruptly halted. Long winters and persistent permafrost preserve much of the town's decay, freezing remnants of daily life as though suspended in time. Snowdrifts form natural barriers around derelict buildings, and icy coatings render familiar structures almost unrecognizable. Even roofs and walls retain subtle signs of human presence, graffiti, laundry lines, and weathered paint that hint at a community abruptly removed. In this frozen tableau, the passage of years is almost imperceptible, lending the town an eerie permanence that contrasts sharply with its ephemeral human occupancy. Official records confirm the evacuation of residents due to declining mining operations and hazardous conditions, yet they cannot capture the suddenness of departure. Economic shifts and the depletion of coal reserves forced authorities to relocate the population, often within weeks, leaving little time for sentimental farewells. While documents provide dates, statistics, and logistical notes, they fail to convey the human atmosphere of abandonment. The quiet halls, the untouched belongings, and the empty streets that now dominate the town. The facts are clear, but the impression of suspended life remains unquantifiable and profoundly haunting. Former workers speak of leaving behind familiar streets under duress, describing a disorienting mix of relief, fear, and lingering uncertainty. Some recount glancing back at homes or offices, noticing the absence of neighbours and the sudden emptiness of communal spaces. These personal memories reinforce the town's strangeness. Despite understanding the necessity of relocation, the visceral sense of leaving life mid-motion lingers in their narratives. The tension between practical decisions and emotional resonance deepens the town's aura, revealing the psychological weight of human absence in stark, tangible form. Buildings sag and splinter, their facades scarred by frost and neglect, while streets once crowded now host only drifting snow. Windows shattered or opaque with ice reveal interiors frozen in mid-use. Newspapers on tables, coats slung over chairs, tools left on benches. The structural decay is gradual yet inevitable, contrasting with the sudden evacuation that left human activity suspended. Each broken window and leaning wall contributes to the sense of a community suddenly paused, a human ecosystem abruptly silenced in the vast expanse of Siberia. Urban explorers and journalists who venture into Kadachan describe an almost surreal stillness, documenting the eerie preservation of a vanished community. Photographs capture interiors lined with abandoned furniture, streets overlaid with frost, and factories that remain as silent monuments to industry and human endeavour. Visitors remark on the dissonance of scale. The town appears alive from a distance, yet every step confirms the emptiness and frozen decay. This juxtaposition creates a tension that is both haunting and captivating, amplifying the unsettling feeling of traversing a place caught between memory and erasure. Walking through empty playgrounds and frozen factories, the absence of human life is felt more acutely than any noise could convey. The town seems to observe its visitors, its silence weighing against every footstep. The interplay of light and shadow through broken windows, frost-laden doorways and snow-covered streets transforms ordinary architecture into ghostly silhouettes. Here, history and absence coexist, and the lingering imprint of daily life remains palpable, yet inaccessible, offering a profound meditation on human impermanence and the power of stillness. Even after years, the town seems frozen in the instant of its abandonment, a haunting reminder of human vulnerability to economic and environmental forces. Over time, wind, frost and decay will gradually erode the structures, but for now, Kadachan retains a spectral vitality. Each building, street and object is a testament to the abrupt intersection of necessity and loss, the human and the environmental, leaving an impression that persists beyond mere statistics or photographs. The town's eerie preservation ensures that anyone who steps into it senses the lingering presence of life, paused indefinitely. In Kadachan, every empty room and silent street seems to whisper that the lives once lived there have not fully departed, leaving the town suspended between memory and oblivion. The ghost ships of the Kara Sea. A lone vessel drifted silently across the ice-strewn expanse, its decks coated in frost and its crew nowhere to be found. Mariners navigating the Kara Sea have long reported such derelict ships, appearing abruptly along fog-laden horizons, their presence both startling and inexplicable. Some are spotted by chance, emerging from the frozen fog as though conjured from the Arctic itself, while others remain hidden until survey aircraft or satellite imagery reveal their outlines. The sheer emptiness of these waters, coupled with the isolation of the region, intensifies the eerie impression that these vessels carry the memory of lives abruptly interrupted. The Kara Sea stretches across the Arctic, its waters treacherous and unforgiving, often hidden beneath floating ice and shifting fog banks that obscure visibility for days. Temperatures plunge far below freezing, while storms can sweep over the water with little warning, tossing vessels into dangerous currents or crushing them within ice flows. Historically, these waters have challenged even the most experienced navigators, and modern technology, while helpful, cannot fully mitigate the Arctic's unpredictability. The sea's vastness amplifies the mystery of ghost ships, making their sudden appearance a chilling reminder of nature's indifferent power and the vulnerability of human endeavours in such extremes. Merchant and exploration routes once wove through these northern waters, connecting isolated settlements and resource sites despite the relentless cold. Traders, whalers, and later industrial fleets relied on knowledge passed down over generations, navigating by ice patterns, landmarks, and rudimentary instruments. The presence of abandoned vessels along these routes is therefore doubly unsettling. Not only are the ships empty, but their loss represents a failure of systems honed over decades. Each derelict craft invites speculation about the fates of those aboard, revealing a silent narrative etched into ice and steel that only careful observation can trace. Mariners have reported abandoned ships emerging from the horizon, their sails frozen, masts creaking, yet entirely unoccupied. In some cases, lifeboats remain tied to rails, cargo lies strewn across frost-laden decks, and personal items suggest hurried departure. Observers recount the unnerving sense of a vessel almost alive, drifting in deliberate patterns despite the absence of human guidance. The psychological effect on sailors is profound. The Arctic silence, paired with the visible vestiges of life aboard, creates an atmosphere both mesmerizing and unnerving, where the mind struggles to reconcile the familiar form of a ship with the stark reality of emptiness. Blizzards and sudden squalls can conceal navigation hazards, leaving even experienced sailors vulnerable to the Arctic's unpredictable wrath. Icebergs, shifting flows, and hidden shoals can trap or damage ships within minutes, sometimes forcing crews to abandon them hastily. Historical records document such events repeatedly, though the exact circumstances of many ghost ships remain unknown. The combination of environmental peril and the sheer isolation of the Kara Sea ensures that a vessel left adrift often vanishes from observation for weeks or months, emerging later with no trace of its crew or prior location. On inspection, decks reveal frozen equipment, scattered cargo, and subtle signs of hasty departure, as if the crew vanished mid-task. Rusting rails and brittle ropes attest to the passage of years, while ice encases once functional machinery in a crystalline prison. Some ships show signs of minor collisions with ice flows, yet others appear untouched, preserved as if by accident or design. These physical details contribute to the sense of unreality, emphasizing the fragile boundary between human industry and the Arctic wilderness. Every deck, cabin, and hatch narrates the sudden pause of human endeavor in a land that tolerates no hesitation. Experts suggest a combination of mechanical failure, shifting ice, and navigational errors may explain some disappearances, though certainty remains elusive. Historical logs, maintenance records, and maritime accident reports provide partial explanations for a fraction of the ghost ships, but countless cases resist documentation. The remaining vessels invite more speculative theories, ranging from sudden crew evacuations to environmental anomalies. Yet no theory fully accounts for the eerie regularity with which these ships are discovered, or for the uniform emptiness that greets anyone boarding them. The balance between evidence and mystery is delicate, leaving an impression of the sea as a keeper of secrets. Drifting among these ghostly hulks, one is struck by the vast silence and endless horizon, the emptiness both oppressive and hypnotic. Sound carries differently across icy waters, and even the faint creak of a frozen mast seems amplified in the Arctic quiet. Horizons blend into grey skies, erasing all sense of distance, and the drifting vessels appear suspended between water and sky, reality and memory. Observers describe a profound vertigo, a sensation that the ships exist outside time, their stillness contrasting with the relentless movement of currents and ice around them. It is a maritime desolation that challenges perception as much as it does imagination. Modern satellite monitoring occasionally captures the outlines of these derelict vessels, confirming that ships continue to appear far from ports and shipping lanes. Remote sensing allows researchers to track movement across ice-laden waters, though visibility is often limited, and real-time observation remains difficult. Some ships detected in one season reappear later in different locations, illustrating the Arctic's capacity to shift massive objects silently over great distances. These findings underscore the environmental factors at play while preserving the enigma. Technology can locate the hulls, but it cannot explain the crew's absence or the eerie consistency of these occurrences. Patterns emerge. Many ships are discovered in similar stretches of sea, hinting at environmental forces or hidden hazards beneath the surface. Ice channels, underwater ridges, and seasonal currents may funnel vessels into particular corridors, yet patterns do not fully explain why some are found intact while others are partially destroyed. Historical accounts show repeated encounters in these zones across decades, suggesting a persistent interaction between human navigation and Arctic unpredictability. For sailors and researchers alike, the convergence of history, environment, an unexplained abandonment creates a haunting sense that the Kara Sea itself exerts a mysterious influence over these ghostly wanderers. Sailors recount unease while passing through these waters, noting the unsettling sight of ships abandoned yet seemingly preserved in ice. The visual juxtaposition of familiar maritime forms against the stark, frozen backdrop unsettles even seasoned crews. Some speak of shadows moving across decks in peripheral vision, only to find them explained by shifting ice or fog, yet the feeling of being watched persists. Stories circulate in small ports and naval circles of vessels that appear without crew, as if the sea itself has claimed them, leaving only the ghostly hulls as evidence of vanished lives. Despite mapping, tracking, and exploration, countless vessels remain unexplained, their empty hulls drifting as enigmas across the frozen sea. Expeditions sometimes encounter multiple derelict ships in a single voyage, each presenting a silent narrative of abandonment. Histories of fishing, trade, and industrial transport intersect with environmental hazards to leave partial accounts, yet the most haunting aspect remains the human absence. The Arctic preserves the vessels while erasing the people, creating a landscape where memory and mystery intermingle and no single explanation suffices. In the icy expanse of the Kara Sea, the hulls of ships float as silent witnesses, guarding secrets of lives that vanished without a trace. The Ural Mountain radio signals. A strange pattern of static first caught the attention of engineers, flickering across receivers without warning or explanation. Initial recordings puzzled technicians working in remote monitoring stations, as the signals did not match any known frequency used for communications or military operations. The transmissions appeared intermittently, often lasting minutes before vanishing entirely, leaving only the faint memory of an audible pulse. Observers noted a peculiar regularity in some bursts, yet attempts to establish a source only deepened the mystery. For decades, the phenomenon persisted, tantalizing those who sought a scientific or technological explanation and frustrating attempts to categorize it. Electrical equipment began to behave erratically, cutting in and out despite proper maintenance and functioning power sources. Radios would suddenly distort or emit low-frequency hums that could not be traced to interference from nearby machinery. In some cases, sensitive instruments recorded voltage fluctuations, coinciding with the bursts, hinting at an electromagnetic anomaly. Engineers carefully documented each incident, but no pattern emerged to connect them to conventional causes. Even the most seasoned technicians admitted that the behaviour exceeded ordinary technical malfunction, and the irregularity of the events gave rise to whispers of something beyond standard engineering. Pulses of sound emerged intermittently, their rhythm precise yet entirely alien to known broadcast systems. Some were described as short bursts of Morse-like tapping, others as low-frequency droning that seemed to resonate through the surrounding air. Researchers noted that the tones carried over long distances, often penetrating dense mountain ridges that normally impede radio waves. The sonic signature had no obvious origin, and while it did not appear to be harmful, it produced a sense of unease in those nearby. Even simple recordings taken outside the main observation stations captured the phenomenon with startling clarity, suggesting a consistency that defied explanation. Attempts to triangulate the source repeatedly failed, as the signals seemed to shift or vanish when approached. Field teams navigating the slopes with portable receivers found that the anomalies often disappeared entirely when they tried to get closer to the apparent origin. Maps of previous detections failed to converge on a single point, producing a scatter of locations that contradicted standard radio propagation models. This elusiveness led some researchers to speculate that either the mountains themselves were influencing the signals, or that they emanated from a source beyond conventional understanding. The inability to locate the origin lent the phenomenon an almost sentient quality. Observers reported an uncanny sensation of pressure in the air, paired with the low hum that seemed almost alive. Hikers and forestry workers passing through valleys near the monitoring stations described feeling sudden headaches, dizziness, or a sense of being watched. Though anecdotal, these accounts were collected systematically and showed remarkable consistency, suggesting a subtle but real interaction between the signals and human perception. Scientists cautioned against attributing too much significance to subjective impressions, yet the combination of measurable signal anomalies and physiological responses added an unsettling dimension to the ongoing investigation. specialized monitoring stations recorded bursts at varying frequencies, each anomaly resisting categorization or technical patterning. Data logs revealed that the signals occasionally aligned with known geomagnetic fluctuations or auroral activity, but correlations were inconsistent. Some bursts occurred during clear weather, others amid storms or high solar activity, further complicating analysis. Engineers attempted computer modeling, yet predictive simulations repeatedly failed to match field observations. The combination of irregular timing, unpredictable amplitude, and geographic dispersion reinforced the impression that the signals were neither conventional nor easily explained by natural phenomena alone. Magnetic readings in the area fluctuated unpredictably, but none fully aligned with the intensity or timing of the transmissions. Geophysicists noted minor anomalies in local rock formations, which sometimes could affect radio propagation, yet these alone could not account for the clarity and strength of the bursts. Measurements over multiple seasons showed variations that did not correspond to geological or atmospheric cycles. Even the most detailed surveys left gaps that could not be reconciled, leaving researchers to acknowledge that, while natural explanations might play a role, they could not explain the totality of the phenomenon. The irregularity of the signals unnerved even seasoned technicians, producing moments of disorientation and a sense of persistent observation. Engineers reported feeling that the pulses followed them across stations, appearing wherever monitoring continued, only to vanish when equipment was powered down. The eerie predictability of the unpredictability created tension in field teams, with some leaving early to avoid extended exposure. While no harm came from the signals themselves, the combination of mechanical anomalies and unexplained human sensations lent the mountains a presence beyond the purely physical, deepening the air of mystery surrounding the observations. Decades of records show the phenomenon returning cyclically yet inconsistently, leaving gaps that no schedule or instrument could predict. Archival data revealed patterns of activity spanning years, with intervals of silence followed by sudden bursts of intensity. Engineers cross-referenced reports from multiple stations and even amateur radio enthusiasts, finding that the signals appeared in both low and high bands at irregular intervals. The unpredictability ensured that no single monitoring protocol could capture the entire phenomenon, and every attempt to map it produced only incomplete mosaics of activity, each fragment raising more questions than it answered. Engineers and geophysicists continue to debate natural versus artificial origins, but every verified hypothesis leaves critical questions unresolved. Some suggest rare atmospheric or ionospheric phenomena may be involved. Others consider undiscovered geological features producing electromagnetic pulses. Military involvement has been ruled out in official reports, and no nearby settlements or industrial activity could generate signals of this type. The consensus among experts is that the transmissions are real, measurable, and persistent, yet defy the frameworks used to understand terrestrial or technological sources. Each new study deepens both knowledge and uncertainty. Each attempt to isolate or silence the signals has failed, reinforcing the notion that their source operates beyond known boundaries. Equipment designed to block or filter transmissions has no lasting effect, and recorded bursts continue to appear at unpredictable intervals. Researchers acknowledge the limits of observation, recognizing that the signals are as much a phenomenon of the environment as they are of technology. The enduring mystery has transformed the Ural Mountains into a quiet laboratory for the inexplicable, a region where the boundary between natural law and unknown forces seems to blur. The persistent hum lingers in the mountain's hidden corridors, an unseen force that continues to defy explanation and scrutiny. The Siberian Black Snow Incident. Morning arrived with an unsettling contrast as the usually white rooftops and streets were coated in an oily black layer of snow. The sudden darkness transformed familiar neighbourhoods into something unrecognisable, a world inverted in tone. Residents were stunned by the sheer scale of the phenomenon, noting that even rooftops and tree branches, usually sparkling in frost, were now encrusted in the dark material. Photographs circulated quickly, both locally and online, confirming the presence of a phenomenon far beyond a single street or block. Though the snow appeared superficially ordinary in form, its colour and density immediately suggested something profoundly unusual. Families stepped outside in disbelief, brushing the dark flakes from clothing and windowsills, unsure whether they were witnessing pollution, soot, or something entirely unknown. Children peered at their surroundings with tentative curiosity, while adults debated potential causes, from nearby factories to distant industrial explosions. The unusual snow left a lingering sense of unease as the community struggled to reconcile daily life with this sudden, inexplicable change. In some areas, the snow left black streaks on clothing and sidewalks, raising concern over health hazards, even as no immediate danger could be confirmed. Conversations among neighbours oscillated between rational explanations and whispered theories that carried the weight of folklore. Careful inspection revealed that the snow clung differently than ordinary snow, heavier and speckled with fine particles that shimmered under weak sunlight. Its texture felt abrasive when handled, and it compacted unusually, resisting melting even in areas briefly exposed to sunlight. Scientists and volunteers collecting samples noted that some flakes appeared layered with ash-like residue, while others maintained crystalline clarity, as though carrying two forms of matter simultaneously. The contrast suggested a complex composition, hinting at multiple possible sources, yet none of these observations fully explained the sudden and simultaneous deposition across wide areas, leaving the phenomenon as much a puzzle of behaviour as of appearance. Environmental teams arrived swiftly, collecting samples and recording measurements, yet preliminary analyses offered only partial explanations for the phenomenon. Standard tests for industrial pollutants, soot and volcanic ash yielded results that accounted for fragments of the snow but not its entirety. Equipment measuring pH levels, conductivity and particulate composition produced unusual readings, suggesting chemical or mineral components rarely encountered in Siberian snowfall. Even repeated sampling could not produce a uniform profile of the snow's composition, leaving specialists frustrated and compelled to expand their scope to surrounding towns and atmospheric monitoring stations. Laboratory results confirmed the presence of unusual particulates, some resembling industrial soot, while other components remained difficult to identify conclusively. Trace metals and fine silicate particles were detected, but no single source could account for their concentration and distribution. The inconsistencies hinted at a combination of human and natural factors, yet no known industrial process matched the composition of what fell from the sky. Analysts emphasized that while some aspects of the snow could be explained by long-range pollution, other elements remained entirely anomalous, defying conventional categorization and adding a layer of mystery that scientific procedures alone could not resolve. Meteorologists suggested known processes such as long-range ash deposition or atmospheric transport, though these alone could not account for the widespread and sudden appearance. Weather patterns that year included unusual jet stream shifts and sporadic thermal inversions, which might carry particulate matter across long distances. Volcanic activity hundreds of kilometers away produced ash plumes capable of crossing borders, yet nothing corresponded precisely to the timing or scale of the black snowfall. Atmospheric modelling confirmed the plausibility of partial transport, but the sheer intensity and darkness of the snow required additional explanation, one that continued to elude even the most thorough scientific scrutiny. The darkness spreading over the town unnerved residents, inspiring local tales of curses and omens rooted in Siberian folklore that gave form to their anxiety. Stories circulated of sky soot as a portent of misfortune, while elders recalled tales of black snow associated with famine or ecological disaster. Some citizens began leaving notes or symbols outside homes, hoping to ward off invisible forces, while others refused to venture outdoors until the snow melted. Despite skepticism, the intensity of the visual impact, combined with lingering particulate residue, produced a palpable tension that transformed daily routines into careful negotiation with the environment. Reports indicated that black snow appeared sporadically in surrounding villages, sometimes hundreds of kilometers away, challenging attempts to trace its source. Monitoring teams noted that deposition patterns did not follow simple geographic or meteorological logic. In some cases, isolated mountain ridges or river valleys received heavier accumulation than open plains, defying expected dispersion models. The irregularity of the snowfall suggested multiple vectors of origin, or perhaps an unknown mechanism influencing its spread. Communication between towns became critical as researchers sought patterns, yet each report seemed to add more questions than answers, reinforcing the sense that this was no ordinary environmental event. Vegetation and water sources showed signs of alteration, with blackened leaves and sediment layers hinting at environmental consequences beyond mere surface discoloration. Streams carrying meltwater exhibited traces of particulate matter, while grasses and shrubs under the snow struggled with delayed thawing and contamination. Wildlife behaviour appeared affected in localised areas, as animals avoided heavily coated ground and showed signs of distress in feeding patterns. The interplay between snow, soil and water highlighted a chain of subtle but measurable consequences, emphasising that the black snowfall was not only visually unsettling, but potentially impactful on the ecosystem in ways that required careful observation. Harsh conditions and inconsistent reporting complicated efforts to monitor the snowfall, with remote settlements and unpredictable weather frustrating all attempts to locate a pattern. Teams travelling across snowbound roads or frozen rivers faced hazards from both environment and logistics, often losing days attempting to verify local reports. Instruments left unattended risked malfunction in extreme cold, while communication gaps prevented rapid correlation of observations. Even with satellite imagery and atmospheric data, the sporadic nature of the phenomenon resisted conventional tracking methods, creating an almost ephemeral quality to the black snow that heightened both frustration and intrigue among scientists and journalists alike. Continuous sampling and analysis have yielded intriguing yet incomplete results, leaving the full origin and mechanism behind the black snow a profound mystery. While elements of the snowfall can be accounted for through pollution, distant volcanic activity and atmospheric transport, the entirety of the event remains unexplained. Attempts to predict future occurrences are inconclusive, and the phenomenon has prompted broader inquiries into environmental monitoring in Siberia. The combination of visual shock, chemical anomalies, and unpredictable spread ensures that this black snowfall continues to occupy both scientific inquiry and public imagination, resisting closure while demanding attention. The blackened flakes continue to fall silently, a reminder that even the purest landscapes can conceal the unknown. The ghostly lights of the Taimyr Peninsula. A faint glow appeared over the frozen horizon, flickering with a rhythm that seemed almost deliberate to the lone herder trudging through the tundra. The lights cut through the grey of early evening, their movements subtle yet undeniably intentional, as if responding to unseen observers. Snow swirled in the cold wind, reflecting faintly against the glow, creating an illusion of motion that blurred the boundary between sky and ground. For hours, the herder followed the shimmering display, noting how it shifted in intensity and hue. This phenomenon had been reported by others across Taimyr, yet each encounter retained a singular strangeness, impossible to categorize. The lights shifted unpredictably, sometimes darting closer and then retreating, their colors ranging from pale blue to deep amber, defying natural explanation. Unlike the steady brilliance of the aurora borealis, they appeared in bursts and arcs, moving with a speed and precision inconsistent with wind or atmospheric refraction. Observers documented how the lights would vanish abruptly, only to reappear elsewhere, sometimes hovering just above the tree line or skimming over frozen lakes. Cameras often failed to capture their full intensity, leaving only faint blurs or streaks of colour on film, reinforcing the sense that these lights existed partially beyond the normal spectrum of perception. A quiet tension settled over the traveller as the lights hovered nearby, prompting both fascination and unease in equal measure. The isolation of the tundra amplified every flicker and reflection, turning ordinary snowdrifts into shifting shadows that seemed to animate with the movement of the glow. Some attempted to approach the lights, only to find them receding, elusive yet almost sentient in their avoidance. Even seasoned herders, accustomed to the harsh northern nights, reported a disconcerting awareness of being watched, a subtle psychological weight that lingered long after the lights disappeared from view. The surrounding landscape, a desolate expanse of snow and sparse vegetation, magnified the sense that these luminous forms were intruders from another realm. Flat plains extended in all directions, broken only by frozen rivers and isolated outcroppings of rock, offering no obstruction to the unearthly spectacle. The emptiness allowed the lights to dominate the horizon, their presence simultaneously captivating and oppressive. Shadows stretched unnaturally as the glow reflected off icy surfaces, and distant hills occasionally appeared to bend the light in impossible ways, suggesting optical phenomena that challenged conventional understanding. Elders in nearby settlements whispered of similar phenomena, tales passed down through generations linking flickering lights to spirits or warnings from the land itself. These stories described luminous apparitions leading travellers astray, illuminating paths that disappeared into snowbound emptiness, or hovering silently above sacred sites. Herders spoke of lights that mimicked the movements of their sled dogs or shone in patterns resembling distant fires, fueling speculation that the phenomenon possessed a form of intelligence. Though rooted in folklore, these narratives aligned uncannily with modern reports, suggesting that the lights had persisted for decades, if not centuries. Scientists studying geomagnetic patterns noted minor anomalies in the region, yet none fully accounted for the behaviour or timing of the mysterious illuminations. Instruments measured subtle fluctuations in the Earth's magnetic field, occasionally coinciding with reported sightings, but no definitive link could be established. Atmospheric conditions, such as temperature inversions or ice crystal formations, explained only certain aspects of the light's movement and intensity. Even satellite imaging provided inconsistent evidence. Sometimes the lights were visible from orbit, at other times absent. The phenomenon seemed to straddle the line between measurable science and unexplainable experience. Repeated sightings suggested patterns, though irregular ones. The lights sometimes appeared to follow travellers, other times vanishing entirely, leaving no trace. Accounts from sledding expeditions describe lights mirroring their movements, ascending or descending in response to speed and direction. In other cases, the lights clustered briefly before dispersing in multiple directions simultaneously. This unpredictability frustrated efforts to map or predict their behaviour, and those attempting longitudinal studies often found their notes contradicted by subsequent observations. The lights were neither constant nor random, existing in a space that resisted human attempts at classification. Herders reported instances where the lights lingered above frozen lakes, reflecting in the ice in ways inconsistent with known auroral effects. Observers noted that reflections sometimes shimmered ahead of the original light source, creating illusions of twin or mirrored entities. The phenomenon occasionally coincided with windless, clear nights, yet vanished under cloud cover or during inclement weather, defying simple correlations with meteorology. Attempts to measure distance or intensity often yielded results that contradicted each other, adding layers of uncertainty. Even when scientific instruments confirmed the presence of light, the subjective experience of movement, depth, and colour remained profoundly disorienting. Sleep-deprived observers described a growing unease as the glow persisted into the long twilight, unsettling even those accustomed to the harsh northern environment. Isolation, cold, and fatigue intensified the psychological weight of the spectacle, heightening sensitivity to every flicker and shadow. Travellers reported difficulty distinguishing between physical terrain and the illusions created by light, and some abandoned plans to navigate at night entirely. The phenomenon provoked an uneasy duality, awe at its beauty and fear at its unpredictability. Over time, it became clear that the light's allure was inseparable from the psychological tension they generated. Harsh conditions, isolation, and the fleeting nature of the phenomenon made systematic study nearly impossible, leaving only fragmented observations behind. Expeditions were limited by weather, terrain, and the vast distances separating settlements, while equipment often malfunctioned in sub-zero temperatures. Even local guides struggled to provide reliable accounts due to the irregularity of sightings. Communication between researchers and observers was slow, and many reports arrived too late for verification. Each sighting added detail but also increased uncertainty, reinforcing the sense that the lights existed beyond conventional observation, occupying a liminal space between reality and perception. Though multiple accounts converged on consistent visual details, the full nature and origin of the ghostly lights remain beyond comprehension. Patterns are elusive, scientific explanations incomplete, and folklore interpretations variable, yet all converge on a single truth. The phenomenon continues to captivate and unsettle those who witness it. No instrument, theory, or legend has fully accounted for their persistence, movement, or intensity, leaving the lights as one of the Taimyr Peninsula's most enduring mysteries. The combination of beauty, danger, and unpredictability ensures that the ghostly lights will remain a source of fascination and fear for generations. The silent lights continue to flicker along the frozen horizon, as if the tundra itself were keeping a secret no one has yet deciphered.